Bell was the weakest adventurer no one wanted until he awakened his strongest SS rank skill and gets a harem. Bell is your typical weak, disgusting F rank adventurer who recently got into the business of isekaiing monsters. One day, he tries to escape from a powerful monster in a dungeon, but he reaches a dead end with no means of escape. The monster almost isekais the already scared weakling, but a beautiful lady named Aze, also known as the Sword Princess for her skills, suddenly appears and sends the monster to Hades, shocking Bell. Following this, he quickly heads over to meet Anat to ask about the girl who just saved his ass. She first rebukes him for going to the 5th level of the dungeon alone, and then tells him that he is lucky to still be alive after coming across a Minotaur, being a level 1 adventurer. He asks her if she has any information about the girl, and she immediately realizes that he's crushing on her already. She tells him Aze is a level 5 adventurer from the Loki familia, and is one of the strongest swordsmen in the city. However, she breaks his jaw when she tells him Aze can't date a weak idiot like him.
Emotional, damn it!
He feels sad as he goes to exchange the magic stones he earns for money, and after this, Anna tells him girls like alpha males, encouraging him that if he becomes stronger, Aze might eventually notice him. As he heads out, he recalls his grandfather's words that real adventurers pick up girls in a dungeon, and he becomes determined to do his best. He returns home to meet his goddess, Estia, who becomes worried upon hearing that a Minotaur attacked him. However, he promises her he will never leave her alone and helpless in the world, since he is the only member of her familia. She then offers him her rice cakes, telling him she won't let him get any sleep tonight.
Let's go!
Later that night, after getting the status report on Bell's abilities, he realizes that his agility has really increased, and Estia speculates that it could be because he faced a Minotaur. However, she hides from him that he's now obtained a skill called Realis Phrase, which accelerates growth as long as his feelings remain, but she is jealous that the change occurred because of another lady. The following day, on his way to the dungeon, Bell meets an ugly girl named Sur, who lures him into promising to eat at their pub at night. He heads to the dungeon, and after isekaiing some monsters, many more terrible monsters appear, scaring him. However, he remembers Aze and chooses to fight. Due to this, his ability scores massively increase, which Estia becomes jealous about as she thinks it's because he likes Aze. Later that night, Bell visits the pub as he promised, and when he assumes he'd be served free food, he accrues bills more than his life savings, but he acts cool before Sur like he's parked a Bugatti outside when he's just a dumbass brokey. Some moments later, a group of ugly folks from Loki familia appear in the pub, and Bell is shocked to see his crush. He begins to watch her as she acts with her friends, and Sire informs him that they come there regularly, which causes him to start thinking of coming too. However, unfortunately, one of the guys begins to talk about the occurrence at the dungeon and ridicules the little boy Aze had saved. Upon hearing this, Bell feels ashamed and immediately runs out without paying his bills. Aze is surprised and wonders if this is the boy she met at the dungeon. He immediately heads to the dungeon to vent his anger on the innocent monsters, with the determination to become stronger. He heads back home the next day, and on meeting Estia, he tells her he wants to become stronger. Following that, she carries out some unknown ritual on him again, as usual, and is shocked his abilities are increasing rapidly. She wonders if she should tell him about his skill, but decides to keep it from him as other gods may be watching. However, she reveals that his status is increasing at an enormous rate, and assures him she will lend him her strength and help him become stronger, but on the condition that he will not do anything reckless like he just did, and will never leave her alone. The lonely boy promises to do his best and never leave her alone. She then tells him she will be heading out of town for a few days, surprising him. Bell immediately heads back to the pub to pay his bill and apologize. Meanwhile, Estia goes to the banquet of the gods, where she meets Hephaestus and begs her to make a weapon for Bell. She declines, but Estia keeps begging her and refuses to give up, making Hephaestus ask her why she is willing to go this far. She replies that she wants to help Bell become stronger, as she has been unable to help him in any way, even when he's always supported her, so she wants to create a weapon to clear a path for him to reach his goal. This moves Hephaestus, and she decides to fulfill the request. However, she tells her she is still required to pay for it, even if it takes her broke-ass decades or centuries to do so. Meanwhile, Bell returns from one of his adventures, and he meets a girl who gives him Sar's wallet, asking him to help her give it to her. He is told that Sar has gone for monstrophilia, and he wonders what that is. She explains that it is a huge festival, held once every year by the Ganesha familia, where monsters captured in the dungeon are brought out to fight against certain contestants before a crowd. Hephaestus finishes making the weapon and gives it to Estia, who immediately leaves so she can get it to Bel. She meets him in the market while he looks for Sir, surprising him and being excited to see him again. She asks him out on a date. A few moments later, she offers him her cream, but he refuses and gives her his instead. Meanwhile, a strange lady walks into a dungeon and frees some monsters, which immediately start to attack the city. A monster appears where Bel and Estia are wasting their time, and on seeing her, it suddenly attempts to attack her. But Bel quickly grabs her and starts to run off, wondering why the monster is coming at her. As they try to escape, the monster soon crosses them and almost isekais Estia, but Bel quickly lunges toward it and lands a strike with his sword. Unfortunately, the sword shatters before his eyes, and the monster knocks him off. It then tries to attack him, but he quickly cracks a substance that blinds its eyes, allowing them to escape. As he runs off with Estia, he reasons that he's too weak to protect her, and decides to lock her away from him to buy her some time to escape, as he doesn't want to lose his family again. He remembers when he received a report that his grandfather had been isekai'd by a monster when he was young, which made him decide to become an adventurer. However, no familia would accept him because he was too weak until Estia suddenly appeared one day and offered to accept him. Meanwhile, the news reaches Lord Ganesha that 9 monsters have escaped into the city and are causing an uproar. He tells them to inform the other familia to help in handling the situation, as he must continue with the festival as usual. Bel's weapons shatter as he fights the monster, and Estia begins to think of how to get the new weapon she made across to him, as she remembers Hephaestus told her the hieroglyphics carved into the knife has its own status, which makes the sword alive, and it can grow stronger even as the user becomes stronger. Meanwhile, Bel continues to fight the monster but barely manages to dodge all its attacks. He wonders if Estia managed to get away and thinks about A's for a moment. However, he suddenly sees Estia and becomes shocked and concerned that she came back to him. The monster immediately tries to attack her, but he quickly saves her and asks her why she came back. She reminds him of his promise to never leave her, and as they talk, the monster appears again, but Bel quickly carries Estia and flees to a safe place, hidden from the monster. While he worries that the monster might still catch up with them, Estia tries to motivate him, but he tells her to stop the cap since his weapon is pretty useless anyway. She shows him the weapon she got him, which she calls the Estia knife, and promises to bring him victory. Meanwhile, Aze is having the best time of her life, isekai'ing monsters, and she is told that there is just one left, which was seen chasing an ugly boy earlier. Estia performs her ritual as usual, trying to update Bel's status and activate Estia knife. As soon as she completes the process, Bel launches out towards the monster. As it almost hits him, he jumps into the air, dodging it. Estia gives him morale from the side as he continues, dodging the raging monster's attacks. He soon attacks head-on and stabs its heart, isekai'ing the ugly monster. Upon seeing this, the cowards who weren't there initially suddenly appear to celebrate his victory. Estia suddenly collapses from exhaustion, and when she later wakes up, Bel asks her where she got the knife. After narrating it to him, he gets emotional and starts to cry as she pats him, telling him he can always rely on her. Following that, he heads over to meet Anat at the guild to request access to the 7th floor, but she thinks he is a moron, as he was almost killed on the 5th floor the previous day. However, he defends that he has gotten stronger since then, and a bunch of his basic abilities are already ranked E, shocking her. She checks him out and realizes that it's true, so she permits him. However, she reasons that he lacks suitable armor and decides to take him out on a shopping trip the next day. On getting to the Babel, the Hephaestus Familia's shop, Bel is shocked as he worries that he's too broke to afford the expensive items they sell, but Anat tells him to act like a top G. As they walk through the shopping mall, Bel sees some crazy expensive stuff that even his life savings in 50 years won't be able to afford. Estia appears to attend to them, shocking Bel as he realizes she works there part-time. Anat soon takes him to the Brokey section to show that the Hephaestus Familia also have poor people like him in mind. He soon finds an armor he can buy. Then, Anat suggests that he hire a supporter to assist him in his dungeon raids to make his exploring more effective, and he replies he will think about it. After a while, as they separate, she gives him a little present, telling him she is concerned about his safety. As he later returns home, he suddenly bumps into a young girl fleeing from an ugly rogue. The dude attempts to attack her, but Bel quickly unsheathes his knife and blocks it. The guy gets angry and almost causes a fight as he warns Bel to leave his way. but Liu appears at that moment and intervenes. Bell turns to check on the young girl but can't find her. The next day, while he heads to the dungeon, he sees the other adventurers with supporters and thinks about Ana's suggestion. Suddenly, the little girl from yesterday appears and asks him if he wants to hire a supporter. While he later talks with her, he discovers her name is Lily, from the Soma Familia, and agrees to try her for one adventure to see if she's fit. Later in the dungeon, he easily isekais all the monsters he faces, and he is excited that having a supporter is helping him focus on fighting. She sees the knife with him and asks about it, and the knave idiot immediately gives a backstory of how he got it. He braces the Estian knife to his clothes and Lily tells him to help her with a task. Later, after selling off the treasures collected at the dungeon, he turns to leave. But Ana suddenly realizes his knife is no more where he usually puts it, and calls his attention to it. Meanwhile, Lily has taken the knife to a buyer who doesn't appraise it accurately and offers to pay peanuts for it. She leaves sad, wondering why the knife is valued so low, and as she walks on, Liu and Sire walk past her. However, Liu discovers she is trying to hide a familiar knife and she stops her, but while Lily tries to deny it, she exposes her, telling her she only knows of one owner who has hieroglyphics carved into his knife. Lily tries to escape but bumps into Bell, who is trying to look for his knife. He sees Siller and Liu and asks them if they have seen his knife. Liu gives it to him, telling him he found it with a girl but refuses to expose Lily. The next day, Bell takes Lily along with him to the dungeon again, and she thanks him for hiring her to work with him. She discovers that he no longer kept his sword where he used to, and he shows her it's not safe under his armor. After that day's loot, they can make a lot of money, and shockingly to Lily, Bell shares the money made equally, and she considers him a weirdo. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, a lady stands up in her chamber, apparently the same lady who released the monsters earlier, and she grabs a strange book from her shelf, deciding to toy with Bell so he can show her the power that sleeps within him. Following that, Bell, now making a lot of money, invites Estia out on a date, and she immediately heads to the divine bathhouse to have a nice shower. Demeter, another goddess, meets her and realizes she's got a gentleman. She makes a fuss about it that embarrasses her, causing her to leave immediately. She later meets Bell at the agreed location, but just before she can do anything lovers do, the other goddesses from the divine bathhouse appear to disturb them. Demeter tells her they had tailed her to find out who she's seeing. Then she grabs Bell and buries his head in her huge melons, annoying Estia, so she quickly takes him and drags him along with her. The goddesses began to pursue them until Bell and Estia managed to escape from them later that night. Meanwhile, a group of ugly idiots bullies little Lily and takes her money off her. However, she becomes determined that she will flee as soon as she pays off her debt and lays her hand on Estia's knife. The next day, Ana hears about a dude from the Soma Familia who got into a fight with the money changer, and she wonders why they are always desperate. Meanwhile, while Bell fights monsters in the dungeon, he almost gets attacked by one, but Lily quickly uses her magic weapon to save him, and he is surprised she has something so valuable. The following day, Bell takes a day off and meets Sir to ask her what she does on her days off. She suggests reading and lends him a magic book a customer had left behind. As he later reads through the mysterious book, he has a strange magical experience. Estia returns and meets him sleeping. Then she wakes him and decides to check his status report. She shockingly discovers he can now wield magic called Firebolt, exciting him. She then tells him that his magic is unique as he doesn't need to recite any incantation to wield it. She suggests he tries it out the next day when he visits the dungeon, but the dickhead later sneaks out that night to the dungeon to try out his new magic ability. He roasts the life out of the monsters and soon collapses from exhaustion. Meanwhile, Hayes and Riberia, who also are in the dungeon, return from their adventure and meet him unconscious. Eyes decides to make up for the previous time, and she begins to pat him. He soon wakes up, thinking it's his mother, but as soon as he realizes it's Eyes, he becomes embarrassed and flees like an idiot, leaving her to wonder why he runs away every time. The next morning, while he sulks over not having the balls to stand before his crush, Estia sees the book he was reading the previous day and discovers it's a grimoire, a book that grants you magic according to your latent ability when read. She asks him where he got the book, and he replies that he was given it by Sir, who told her that someone had forgotten it. She becomes disappointed as she tells him that a grimoire loses its power once somebody reads it. Estia reminds him that he is a brokey and can't afford such. She tells him to deny ever reading it, but he ends up taking it back to the pub to apologize anyway. Later that morning, while Bell goes to meet Lily, he sees someone harassing her and tries to intervene, but the idiot who was after her the other day blocks him and makes a stupid offer which he declines. She returns and recalls her shitty past of how she was bullied and molested by adventurers after her parents passed away, which caused her hatred for adventurers since then. Following that, Aina, worried for Belle, meets goddess Loki in the Loki Familia to ask her what she knows about the Summa Familia. And she explains that the Summa Familia makes a kind of wine different from the low quality they sell to the masses. And whenever the members of the Familia get to taste it, they become hooked. So they become desperate for cash and would not mind doing anything to have the wine again. Back at Belle's residence, Estia and Belle discuss Lily, and she makes him realize that there's something shady about her, pointing out the fact that she may have stolen his knife the previous day when he thought he had dropped it. Later, at the dungeon, Lily cunningly urges Belle to go to the 10th floor since he has gotten stronger, and it wouldn't be a problem. Foolish Belle sees this as a good idea, even though he almost died on the 7th floor the previous day, and agrees to follow her suggestion. Meanwhile, while Aina goes for Babel inspection, she worries about Belle, but suddenly sees Ace and walks up to her to thank her for saving the life of an adventurer she's in charge of. Ads is surprised when she realizes she's talking about Ace, and as they talk, they overhear some adventurers discussing how Lily plans to set up Belle. Then, Aina pleads with Az to help save him. On getting to the 10th floor, an overworked monster, an orc, appears and attacks, but Belle immediately charges at it and isekais it in a few strikes. Another one appears and he uses Firebolt against it. Suddenly more orcs begin to appear and begin to attack him. He tries to call out to Lily but doesn't find her, and suddenly Lily steals his weapon back, shocking him. She immediately leaves while he battles with the overwhelming monsters, and as makes her way out of the dungeon, her archenemy intercepts her and harasses her as usual. However, some other adventurers appear and bully him too. He tries to escape, but the idiot only runs to his demise. The other men take her possessions from her and throw her amid monsters to serve as a decoy for them. And while she regrets her life, thinking it's the end for her, Belle suddenly destroys the monsters with his magic and starts to isekai the remaining, shocking her. Belle had already decided to help her, not minding whatever her past is, as she reminds him of how lonely he also was before he met Estia. Lily wonders how they escaped from the 10th floor, and he tells her an unknown adventurer had to come to rescue him after she left, so he quickly came to find her. Lily becomes angry and calls him a moron for coming for her after all she did to him, and she begins to confess all her wrongs to him. She wonders why he still chose to save her, and he tells her it's because of who she is, bringing her to tears. The next day, while she thinks that she will be left alone after all her wrongs, Belle meets her and offers his support a role once again. He then takes her to his home and introduces her to Estia, who addresses her on the rules of the Estia Familia. Belle visits the guild to meet Aina, but he shockingly sees her with Az, and immediately tries to flee again. However, Az stops him and Aina calls him rude for attempting to leave like that. She then tells him that Az wants to talk to him. He soon realizes that she was the adventurer who saved him on the 10th floor and instantly appreciates her for saving him. A few moments later, Az compliments him for making it to the 10th floor so quickly, and he tells her he is still weak and still far from reaching his goal. She offers to teach him, surprising him, and they both head to a sus place to begin the training. Following this, Belle and Lily head to the 10th floor of the dungeon again, and this time, he skillfully defeats the little ugly monsters that attack first. Several orcs suddenly appear, and he reasons that this is a bit too much for him. So his supporters suggest that they run away now and regroup, but he instantly thinks about Az and decides to fight, determined to conquer his fear. The training continues with Az, and she doesn't fail to whoop his ass each time until he passes out. He soon regains consciousness and quickly apologizes for passing out again, and she asks him how he is able to get so strong quickly. He tells her that he is not strong, but that there's a person he wants to catch up to and a place he wants to reach no matter what. She tells him they are both the same, and then she suggests that they practice afternoon naps. She immediately falls asleep as soon as she lies down, and the naughty boy begins to think of kissing her, hearing the words of his grandfather in his head, but his grandmother opposes it, telling him to be a gentleman. However, he almost gives in to his grandfather's words, but Az wakes up before he can do anything silly. They head out to eat, and on getting to a stand, Belle shockingly sees Estia again and wonders how many jobs she's taking, but Estia is only concerned that he is wandering the streets with the lady. After that, Sir excitedly meets Belle, telling him she has been longing to hold him, but she only ends up giving him dishes to do. Liu joins him as he washes the plates, offering to assist, and as they discuss, He realizes she was once an adventurer. He then asks her what he has to do to level up, inquiring if it's just about defeating a lot of monsters, and she replies that she has to do something even harder than that. Specifically, he must defeat a powerful opponent. This prompts him to ask how he can beat something like that, and she tells him that skills and tactics make it possible. Then he instantly remembers as telling him he is lacking in both during one of their training sessions. Liu finally adds that if he wins he's to level up, he needs to go on an adventure, which could mean something different to each person. The next day, he completes his training with Ace, and as she leaves, he is determined to chase her until he reaches her and touches her. The following morning, Bell quickly packs his bag as he prepares to join the Loki familia in the expedition that day, and later, as soon as the adventure begins, Bell and his little supporter head to the ninth floor, and they sense that something is odd about the place as there are too few monsters there. Bell, still having PTSD from what happened the other day, remembers this is what exactly happened before a Minotaur appeared. As they walk on, a Minotaur suddenly appears, shocking them. Lily advises that they leave immediately, but he remains startled until the monster approaches them and almost isekais them, but Lily quickly saves him. She goes unconscious, so he quickly throws her to a safe place before unleashing several attacks at the monster with his magic, but the monster isn't affected. Meanwhile, on the other side of the dungeon, the Loki familia receives the notice that a Minotaur has appeared on the ninth floor and is currently attacking the white-haired kid. Upon hearing this, Ace immediately leaves for the ninth floor. Bell continues fighting the monster but can barely keep up as it is way stronger than he is. Lily regains consciousness, and to save her, he immediately orders her to escape while he distracts the monster. The monster soon knocks into the group, and while he writhes in pain, Ace suddenly appears and tells him she will take it from here. He becomes embarrassed and thinks about the ridicule he would face if she saves him again like the previous time. So he manages to stand his feet again and tells her he can't allow her to save him again. He takes his position again, ready to go on an adventure, and he immediately charges at the monster. He starts fighting with all his might, determined to be a hero. Meanwhile, Lily begs Betet to save her master, but on realizing it's the same boy from the last time, he begins to mock him. He later decides to help him, but as he prepares to go into the fight, he sees something shocking. The level 1 kid's skills have greatly improved, and he is fighting on a whole different level than he has seen before. Bell activates Firebolt, and they are surprised he didn't chant any spell. As the intense exchange continues, he manages to get the Minotaur's large sword from him, and does some damage to him, weakening him. They suddenly charge at each other head-on, and when the audience thinks he is being stupid, he maneuvers himself from harm's way and stabs the monster on his head, before repeatedly unleashing firebolt spells until the monster implodes. They are shocked he could pull this off and decide to find out what his skill status is. They soon discover that all his abilities are S rank. Following this, Bell discovers he has now leveled up to level 2, and he is excited at his discovery. Estia checks his status and discovers that he has gotten a new skill called Argonaut, which was obtained from the desire to be a hero. Estia soon prepares to leave for the quarterly Denatus meeting, the meeting of the gods, where titles are chosen for adventurers who have recently leveled up. Bell is excited that he will be getting a title, and after Estia leaves, he fantasizes about what his title will be, but he is disappointed when Estia returns and tells him he was given the title Little Rookie. He later meets Sar and Liu at the tavern, and Liu advises him to avoid the 13th floor for now until he expands his party, as the strength and numbers of the monsters are quite different on the middle and upper levels of the dungeon. He considers who might want to join his party, then a pathetic loser appears, offering that he join his own team of level 2 adventurers, but he must give them his beautiful chicks to share among themselves. Liu gets angry and gives him what he deserves. A fight almost starts, but the owner of the pub stops them. Following this, Bell heads to Babel to get armor, but he doesn't find any material from the same producer as his previous armor, Wolf Krazo, so he decides to ask the seller. But coincidentally, Wolf himself had been there arguing with the seller about refusing to sell his products. Upon realizing that someone came for products, he gladly shows him his new products and takes him outside to discuss. Wolf offers to make a direct contract with him where he will work for him, crafting whatever he wants, but he would love to join his party. Later in the dungeon, Lily isn't cool with Wolf joining them, and she becomes shocked when she realizes that he is from the Krazo family. She explains that the Krazo family is a family of cursed magic weaponsmiths known as the Fallen Blacksmith Nobles. Belle is surprised, wondering what this means, and she further explains that the family was a clan of famous blacksmiths who made powerful magical items, but one day they lost their abilities and are now a bunch of broke-ass nobles. Wolf is embarrassed by this, and while they talk, some monsters begin to appear. Belle immediately gets into action and swiftly destroys a couple of them, while Wolf still battles with one. Belle discovers he is now faster and his magic is now stronger. His hand immediately starts to glow, and while he wonders what this is, a group of adventurers suddenly appear, fleeing from an infant dragon. However, isn't aware and continues her duty of picking up magic stones, but when she realizes the dragon begins to chase her, Belle quickly activates Firebolt, and a huge laser beam is unleashed, finishing off the dragon in a hit, shocking him. Estia later explains that it was because of his Argonaut skill, which helps him to play hero when in danger. They soon discuss Welf, and she tells him that he has the ability to make magic items, but has refused to even though it would potentially make him a lot of money. After that, Belle meets Welf, who invites him over to his workshop to make some new equipment for him. At the workshop, Welf explains why he doesn't make magic items anymore, as he makes a weapon for Belle using the Minotaur bell, kept since his previous battle. And as soon as he's done, he names the weapon Ushiwakamaru, telling Belle it's the best thing he has ever crafted. The next day, they all set out to the middle floors of the dungeon, being Belle's first time, and after desiccating some monsters with his party easily, some rabbit monsters appear and attack them. They begin to fight them, but soon become outnumbered, making Belle realize that the monsters on the middle floors are much stronger and more numerous than he has ever encountered. Meanwhile, while another group of adventurers from a different familia flees from hellhounds, they see Belle and his party surrounded by monsters, and immediately pass through them, using them as bait to get away. Belle and others immediately start to run too, and while the monsters pursue them, Belle turns around and unleashes Firebolt, sickening some. He slays the remaining, but Welf gets injured in the process. Suddenly, more monsters appear, making Belle remember what Liu told him. The monsters instantly start running towards them, but an earthquake occurs within the dungeon which collapses the walls, thus saving them. However, a hellhound appears and begins to summon fire in its mouth, intending to hail hell upon them. Meanwhile, when Hevia expects that they should have returned but does see them, she heads to the guild to issue a request to find Belle's party. Belle and his party manage to survive the hellhound's breath thanks to the salamander wool they are wearing, which Aina suggested before embarking on the mission. However, as they walk within the dungeon, looking for a way of escape, they reach a dead end, and Welf tells them to leave him behind as his injury will only slow them down. But Belle disagrees, and then Lily suggests that they go down to the 18th floor, shocking them, but she explains that it's one of the several safe zones in the dungeon as monsters don't appear there. She adds that they could survive if they tag along with higher-level adventurers, who would help take them back up. Welf and Belle wonder how this would be possible, and she tells them they will use the dungeon pits. Meanwhile, Estia meets with the other gods and the party who abandoned Belle and his party. And while they consider the shortage of people available to join the search party, Irmas and his subordinate Asvi appear, and he offers to assist them in finding Belle. Asvi is surprised and secretly asks Irmas if he plans to enter the dungeon, which is against the rule that a god enters the dungeon. However, he tells her nobody will find out, but Estia suddenly appears, telling them to also take her along. He tries to dissuade her, but she uses his words against him. They'd all soon gather together, and Estia tells everyone that she can feel Belle is still alive, as the blessing she gave him hasn't disappeared. Later, Irmas asks Asvi if she can protect both him and Estia, and she replies that she can't guarantee, so he tells her they will be taking Leo along too. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Lily uses an awful scent bag to repel the monsters. A hellhound suddenly appears and attempts to unleash its fiery breath, but Welf quickly activates a magic that causes it to self-destruct. The effect of the scent bag soon wears off and a minotaur appears. Belle immediately lunges towards it and makes some damaging strikes. Two more minotaurs appear, so he immediately grabs an axe and attacks using the Argonaut skill, causing the nearby walls to collapse on the monsters. The search party, consisting of 6 people, head into the dungeon. Asvi and Liu show off their skills in isekai the monsters that cross their way very easily. They soon reach the point where the dungeon walls collapsed on Belle and his team, and on observing it, Asvi speculates that they might have headed to the 18th floor, a safe zone, as it is much easier to go down than to go up. They then decide to head to the 18th floor too. Meanwhile, Welf and Lily soon pass out from exhaustion, so Belle grabs them and drags them along with him as he heads for the 18th floor of the dungeon. He jumps into a pit with them and lands on the 17th floor where he sees the Great Wall of Sorrow. However, knowing that this is the dwelling place of the floor boss, Goliath, he immediately begins to run, carrying the two weaklings along, aiming for the 18th floor. The floor boss suddenly awakens and cracks the Great Wall of Sorrow open. It almost lands an attack on him, but he manages to evade its attack and jumps into the pit leading to the 18th floor. He falls to the ground exhausted, and he sees someone standing before him. He requests that his friends be attended to, just before passing out too. He later wakes up, and he is shocked to see Eyes, making him wonder what the fuck she is doing there. To which she replies that he Familia stopped there when they were returning from their expedition. He soon sees his ugly friends and he is relieved. Later, he and Eyes both take a walk where he sees light shining as though there is sun, so he wonders where the light is coming from since they are in the dungeon, only to discover there's a large, beautiful set of crystals responsible for it. Upon returning to his room later, Welf and Lily regain consciousness, and he is excited to see them well again. While they have dinner a few minutes later, they suddenly hear a noise from afar, and he heads over to check who it is, but he is speechless when he discovers it's his goddess who knocks into the ground with her huge plot in excitement. The others soon appear and Belle is surprised to see them, but upon seeing the ugly idiots who use them as bait for the monsters, Welf and Lily get corked up. Even after listening to Mikoto's apology, they refuse to forgive. However, Belle explains that he might have done the same too if his party's lives were on the line, and they immediately decide to let go. After a while, Estia delivers a message and weapon to Welf as requested by Hephaestus, and later that night, Belle meets Eyes when he goes to have a view of the crystals again. She offers to also show him the town, surprising him as he marveled that there is a town in the dungeon. The next morning, they head to Laveria, a small town founded by adventurers, and as they check the different items at the shops, some ugly adventurers from the pub earlier who tried assaulting Belle see him again and get pissed, but the idiots leave immediately. They discovered he is a friend to the Sword Princess. The girls agree to have their baths afterwards, so Hermes secretly meets Belle and requests to have a short time with him later. He later takes him to the top of a tree, and upon realizing that the dude only wanted him to have a 4K view of the girls in their creation state, which he's got no balls for, he tries to tell him that they leave, but he falls off into the water where the ladies are in the process. Embarrassed to see Eyes that way, he quickly runs off, but only to see Leo also having shower plot on the other side of the river. She is shocked to see him, but doesn't consider him a pervert since she knows he has no balls to look at a girl, even if they asked him to.
Emotional, damn it!
She later takes him to the graveside of the familiar she once belonged to pay homage, and she explains that they were all killed except her, when an enemy Familia set a trap for them in the dungeon. This got her angry, and she also wiped out the entire enemy Familia as a revenge, which put her on the guild's blacklist. Later at night, the ugly adventurers are still corking up as they are jealous of Belle's rapid growth. The following morning, Ace meets Belle to tell him she was assigned with the first party and will be leaving first, and as soon as she departs, Belle heads over to Estia's rent only to discover she has been kidnapped as he sees a note asking him to come to a certain location if he wants to save her. He runs there immediately, but Oka sees him as he hastily leaves, wondering what happened. Upon reaching the location, Moldo appears and challenges him to a duel so that if he wins he will get back his goddess, and will lose all his equipment of the Lozes. Moldo suddenly activates an invisible skill, and he begins to attack Belle, who finds it difficult to see him. Meanwhile, Hermes and Asfi watch from afar, as it was he who orchestrated this to show him the ugly side of humanity, and to find out if he has great potential. Uka appears with his team, and they begin fighting with Moldo's men. Lily camouflages as a rabbit and saves Estia from where she is tied to. Uka's team beats the other idiots effortlessly, but Moldo continues to whoop the MC's ass. However, suddenly, he becomes sensitive and begins to perceive Moldo's gaze on him, so he starts to dodge his attacks, shocking him. He finally lands a kick on Moldo, who immediately tries to counterattack, but Estia arrives and orders them to stop. However, Moldo is a bull and doesn't listen, so she uses her power as a goddess to stop him. Estia, always looking for an opportunity, jumps on him in excitement and gives him a feel of her plot one more time. However, a massive shaking occurs and the crystals begin to crack. Goliath appears. They all immediately gather together and begin to joint attack it, but it is resistant to all their attacks, making Leo realize it has to be a level 5 monster. They continue to attack it, trying to distract it, while the mages prepare their incantation. They soon complete the incantation and unleash a powerful magic to destroy Goliath, but it shockingly regenerates after. It then lands a powerful blow that crashes the whole place and overwhelms everyone. The fight continues and Liu lands several strikes at lightning speed, but she's no match for Goliath's regenerative speed, as the damages heal up almost immediately they are caused. Bel's hand begins to glow, and he immediately unleashes Firebolt with the Argonaut skill, severing Goliath's head, but it regenerates instantly. The floor boss immediately counterattacks with a slap aimed at Bel, but Oka quickly jumps in with a shield to reduce the effect, but they both end up unconscious. Estia holds his hand and begins to try some motivational quotes she learned from TikTok. Meanwhile, Bel can hear them in his subconsciousness, but can't bring himself to stand up. Hermes arrives and starts his own motivation session too, which immediately reminds him of the teachings of his grandfather upon how to become a hero. He gets back up on his feet with a burning desire to save his friends as he approaches the monster with his weapon. However, Liu continues attacking at insane speed and finally unleashes her trump card, Luminous Wind, inflicting pain on the monster. Lion immediately follows with War God's Strike, sealing Goliath in a gravity barrier, but soon breaks out of it. Welf quickly charges at it and unleashes a powerful attack called Pyre on the Moon, but the floor boss resists it too. Meanwhile, Bel has been charging up, preparing to unleash Argonaut at its max, and his whole body begins to glow. He lunges at the monster at fast speed and unleashes the hero's strike, causing great damage to it. However, its body isn't destroyed and starts to regenerate again, but Bel immediately hops on it and deals final damage with his Estia knife, completely destroying Goliath. Everyone becomes excited and Hermes praises Zeus, declaring that Bel, his only grandson and the last hero of his familia, will cause a change in history and the fates of heroes. Bel and his team go to the bar to drink some piss to celebrate Welf, who just ranked up to level 2. Lily asks him if he will now be separating from them since he is ranked up, as this was why he joined them in going to the dungeon in the first place. On hearing this, Bel becomes sad, but Welf assures him that they will still be together. Lily asks Bel about him leveling up too, and while he proudly answers her, a short idiot who has been hating on him from afar approaches and starts mocking him. Lily and Welf tell Bel not to mind the blabbing from an idiot, but the little guy continues ranting on, insulting each of them and even speaking badly about Estia. This annoys Bel, but he controls himself. However, Welf wouldn't take trash from a toddler. He hits him with his cup and tutors him on how to talk to adults. He then asks who else wants some trashing, and a random guy responds. The guy swiftly dashes at him and beats his ass before also beating Bel up and lifting him in the sky. The audience is shocked as they recognize this guy as Hyacinthos from the Apollo Familia. Hyacinthos starts to press Bel's neck and almost squeezes his life out, but Lion intervenes, saving Bel's weak ass. On returning home, Estia takes care of him by rubbing her cream on his face, but she's surprised at how weak he is to have been beaten like that. He tells her they were insulting her, and she tells him to laugh it off next time instead of being beaten to a pulp like a wimp. Estia soon inquires about the attacker, and she is shocked when she hears he is from the Apollo Familia. The next day, Bel meets Aina, and while with her, two ugly wannabes, Daphne and Cassandra, appear and give him a letter to give to his goddess. When Estia later opens it, she realizes it's an invitation from Apollo to a banquet. She wonders why he chose to invite them now and also considers the love affair she used to have with Apollo. Following this, they set out to the banquet, and after exchanging pleasantries with Hermes and his ugly associate, Apollo appears with his subordinates. Bel sees the guy who trashed his ass, and he almost pisses his pants. After Apollo finishes welcoming everyone to the party, Bel just sits down and looks around while his broke goddess eats like a glutton. Hermes notices and walks up to him, asking if he wants to speak with Apollo. While they talk, Freya makes a grand entrance and walks past. Hermes begins to talk about her, but Estia immediately gets jealous and prevents Bel from looking at her. Freya notices and immediately turns to meet them. She asks Bel if she will give her his meat tonight, but Estia cuts her in anger, making the beauty goddess leave immediately. A clash between Estia and Loki follows this, and Hermes notices some chemistry between Bel and Aes. Following this, Bel steps outside for some fresh air and sees some suspicious activity between Hyacinthos and one other ugly dude, but he overlooks it when Hermes appears to talk with him. While they talk, Hermes sees Aes and immediately asks Bel if he will dance, but he replies that he's never danced before because he's a riskless loser. Irmas immediately asks Aizan to dance but implicates Belle by calling him to dance with her instead, saying he just remembered that he already asked to dance with another girl earlier. Belle and Aiz begin dancing and almost fall, being both their first time, but they soon master the art and begin dancing as though they've been doing it for 25 years. Some minutes later, Apollo comes over to meet and brings up the topic of the fight that occurred the previous day. He had set them up and now accuses Belle of starting the fight. Estia objects in anger, but he suddenly makes an announcement, challenging the Estia Familia to a war game, shocking them. He tells her if the Apollo Familia wins, he will take Belle for himself. Estia turns down the challenge and leaves with Belle immediately. However, the next day, as Belle prepares to leave for the dungeon, they shockingly find all the members of the Apollo Familia in front of their home, ready to take Belle by force. Then Apollo starts attacking and Belle quickly flees with Estia. He carries her as he runs away while the attackers chase them. They soon reach a dead end, and Belle instantly leaps onto the roof. However, there's no escaping, as he sees Cassandra and Daphne there. The two girls advise him to give up trying to escape, as Apollo never gives up on anyone he's taken a liking to until he's gotten them. They add that this was how he chased them everywhere too, until they gave up. Daphne tells him to give up, but he tells her he doesn't take advice from idiots and immediately jumps off the roof, escaping with the help of his firebolt spell. As Daphne prepares to go after him, Cassandra tells her it doesn't seem right to be fighting him, having seen in a prophetic dream that they are after the wrong guy, but Daphne doesn't give a damn about her shitty fortune-telling. Meanwhile, Welf and Lily are waiting for Belle to arrive, but soon begin to suspect there's something wrong as Belle never comes late for their adventures. They suddenly overhear some people talking about how Apollo started a fight against the Estia Familia, shocking them. Aiz also receives a report that Belle is being attacked, but her Familia warns her not to meddle in his affairs so it won't seem like the Loki Familia is helping the Estia Familia. Belle and Estia continue fleeing, with him protecting her as much as he can, and while they run, Estia sees a familiar emblem on one of the attackers' clothes, surprising her. Hyacinthos suddenly appears and starts attacking Belle. He deals some huge damage to him as Belle is too weak to match his speed. Hyacinthos is pained that his master loves Belle even though he has faithfully served him for a long time. Belle reasons that he has plot armor since he is the MC, so he dashes at him, but he gets whooped in the ass mercilessly. Hyacinthos also harvests a part of his body, but a strange sniper suddenly fires arrows from afar, saving him. She continues to fire arrows at Hyacinthos, allowing Belle and Estia to manage to flee the scene. However, he is too weak and can't move quickly. They decide to sit for some time, but soon get blasted by another attacker. As these folks from the Apollo Familia prepare to continue attacking, the Tok Familia shows up and begins to defend them. In the heat of this battle, Welf and Lily appear with Maich, who pours some potions on Belle's face, instantly healing all his wounds. Maich tells Belle to run while they handle the enemies, and though he is initially reluctant, he eventually agrees and flees with Estia and his team. As they escape, they face another group of enemies, so Welf and Lily engage them, allowing Belle and Estia to escape. Welf unleashes his attacks while Lily covers up for him. She jumps on the roof, and while she runs across, she suddenly meets Xanis from her Familia, who is surprised that she is still alive. After some conversation, she changes her mind and leaves with him, leaving Welf to sort himself. Welf wonders what the hell just happened and immediately recognizes the emblem on his opponent's cloth. It's the Soma Familia. Estia and Belle manage to hide, and while they catch their breath, she tells him she likes him and that she would love to spend forever with him, surprising him. She then asks what he thinks about her, only for him to reply that he respects her. They receive a blast and immediately start to run again, with Estia telling him to head towards the Apollo Familia. On getting there, Belle wonders what sort of a stupid move this is, but Estia leads them inside to meet Apollo, and then reveals that they are up for the war game challenge, exciting him and everyone around. After leaving, they meet Welf, who tells them about Lily. Belle is shocked and immediately prepares to set out in search of her, but Estia tells him to leave that to her while he instead focuses on training to be better than every fighter in the Apollo Familia. Belle accepts and immediately heads to meet Aiz and Tiona to ask them to train him for the upcoming war game. Meanwhile, Xanis takes Lily back to the Soma Familia to show her to Soma, saying the missing girl has returned. He tells him that she has promised to change ways and serve the Familia, but she quickly interrupts and begs Soma to let her leave the Familia, annoying Xanis, who tells her that if that's what she wants, she has to pay a huge price in compensation for all the good Soma has done for her in the past. Lally becomes sad because she's a blue checkmark verified brokey, and as she tries pleading with Soma, he tells Xanis he can do whatever he pleases. Xanis throws her in jail and reminds her that he called back the Soma Familia troop because she promised to return with him and serve the Familia again. She then asks him what she can do, and he refers to her rare transformation magic, shocking her. Following this, Estia meets with the Tak Familia to plan now to save Lally. However, they ask her why they are focusing on this when they ought to be focused on winning the war game, and she replies that Bell can't fight at his best when he is worried about Lily, so they have to save her so all his focus can be put into training hard. Meanwhile, there's an ongoing Donatus meeting where the terms of the war game are to be announced, but Estia is yet to show up, making them think she's trying to run away. However, she suddenly appears, and the meeting begins. She suggests that one representative be selected from each familia, since the Estia Familia only has one member. But Apollo objects to it, saying it's because of her laziness as a goddess. He then asks for the opinion of the others through voting. Hermes picks a vote by random, and Estia is shocked when she discovers he picked a siege. Apollo is pleased and tells her her familia can be the attacker since they can't defend a castle with their weak one member. Hermes suggests that the Hesta Familia be allowed to get external support, but Apollo refuses. However, the other gods support Hermes' notion, giving Apollo no other choice than to agree. Moreover, he declares that Estia Familia can only get one support, and it must be from a member of a familia outside town. After they leave the meeting, Estia's team asks her if she knows anyone, and she replies that there is someone outside town. That night, while Xanis has a chit-chat with Lily about how she will make money for them with her powers, a security guard comes reporting that some rabbits have intruded, led by a little clueless goddess, so Xanis responds that they should be exterminated. Lily starts to plead, but he doesn't listen, so she tells him she wouldn't help him with what he wants then. He instantly threatens to give her the god's wine, which will force her into loyalty, shocking her. He soon leaves, and while she thinks of how to escape so she can save her friends, the security guy throws the keys to the lock at her, shocking her as he tells her to do whatever she pleases. She immediately heads out to check on her friends, and on seeing them, she begs them to leave immediately. But Estia replies that Belle needs her to win the war game, shocking her. She gets emotional and immediately heads to meet Soma, wondering why Belle needs a nobody like her. She begins to beg Soma to save her friend. However, he prepares the divine wine and gives it to her to drink, saying he will do whatever she wants if she can repeat the same words she is saying after she's taken the wine. She is surprised by this, but takes the wine from him anyway and drinks it. She enters a state of euphoria and begins to see the heavens, but she instantly sees Belle and regains her mind. She immediately continues to beg Soma again, surprising him. He instantly goes to stop the fight, not minding Xanis' objection. Xanis attempts to attack her then, but he is stopped. Following this, Lily thanks Soma and tells him she wants to transfer to the Estia Familia, which he agrees to. Later, after the transfer, she gives a vote of thanks to everyone for coming to her rescue, and the other guys soon depart for their various destinations. The next day, while Takemikazuchi paces back and forth, thinking of how to help Belle, Mikoto approaches him to ask for permission to join Estia Familia. Welf also goes to his familia to reveal his desire to join the Estia Familia. Meanwhile, Hermes and Sur go to beg Ryu to join Belle in the war game, as she is the only one who meets the specifications. Also, Belle continues to train as hard as possible under Aiza's tutelage. Belle soon returns to his familia, fully prepared for the war game, and sets out immediately. On his way, the other passengers cheer him on in the fight, and Sire runs after his vehicle to give him a pendant she calls a good luck charm. Later that night, Cassandra tells Daphne about another dream regarding the upcoming war game, but she doesn't listen to anything Cassandra says. Meanwhile, a small kid manages to enter the city before the gate closes, and he hauls a huge object into the city on a cart. When Cassandra sees this, she says Apollo's fate is sealed. The next morning, as they prepare to commence the competition, Apollo approaches Estia to mock her, asking if she's told Belle her final goodbye, but she doesn't say a word. Hermes activates the streaming platform across all locations in the city, and the war game commences. Some idiots from the Apollo Familia think that the Hestis Familia will not attack immediately since they have 3 days for the fight, but they are proved wrong as Ryu suddenly launches the first move by flying down a mountain. She starts attacking the enemies using Krazo's magic weapons, surprising everyone. After dealing some damage, the little boy from yesterday quickly runs to meet the other soldiers, telling them that Hyacinthos ordered that 50 out of the total 100 soldiers they have should go outside and fight against Ryu. The soldiers find this ridiculous, but trust the little boy and head out to fight her immediately. They manage to destroy her magic weapons, but just as they think they have overpowered her, they realize she is an elf as she draws out her wooden sword and starts teaching them some life lessons. Meanwhile, while they fight with Ryu, Makoto sneaks into the city without their notice. She dashes into the city and soon meets a Jigga-Chad who tries to resist her. But she's got no business with some useless, ripped idiot standing in her way. She gets past him as quickly as it is to hack a Facebook account and then activates War God's Strike spell, which causes a massive gravitational pull on the enemies, making them unable to move. Irmas, observing the fight, reasons that the Apollo Familia soldiers are moving too fast, and he wonders if someone is giving them the wrong information, influencing their senseless attacks. While Apollo is still in shock at what is befalling his soldiers, his shock doubles when he sees the same little boy from yesterday opening the city gate. Welf and Bell appear, and they commend Lily, who happened to have shape-shifted into the little boy to deceive the Apollo Familia soldiers. Bell and Welf run into the city and start heading for the castle where the general is. As they run, Welf activates a magic spell that isekais all their opponents, allowing Bell to continue heading for the castle. He soon gets to the floor directly under that of the general, and while Hyacinthos tries reciting some personal affirmations to boost his confidence even though Cassandra has warned him to flee, Bell suddenly activates Argonaut and Firebolt, which causes a major quake. He immediately attacks Hyacinthos, who finds it difficult to match up with his speed. He soon breaks his sword, and while he attempts to deal the final blow, Cassandra holds him, stopping him from isekaiing her master. Hyacinthos uses this opportunity to unleash a ring of fire, but Lily quickly pushes Cassandra off, allowing Bell to dodge the attack. However, it starts coming towards him again, so he tries casting Firebolt to stop it, but it doesn't affect it. The ring hits him, cutting the good luck charm pendant on his neck, and he lays on the ground completely exhausted, shocking everyone. However, he stands to his feet again and drops his knife. Hyacinthos draws out a dagger and charges at him immediately, intending to end his little life, but Bell instantly remembers Aza's words in a similar situation, and he immediately pulls a move right out of his favorite anime. He skillfully dodges the attack and delivers a knockout punch, which sends Hyacinthos into a coma, making him the winner. After this, the Estia Familia takes all of Apollo's possessions, including his mansion, and makes it their new home. Estia makes a terrible sketch like a third grader with no art experience and calls it their new emblem. Following this, Lily goes to say her final goodbye to Soma, and after this, the members of the Estia Familia make a toast, celebrating their new home and Bell's ranking up to level 3. Estia has splurged a huge amount on renovating the mansion, giving each member of the Familia what they desire. Makoto goes to shower in a hot sauna while Welf admires his new blacksmith workshop. Lily becomes concerned that their goddess is spending like a lottery winner. However, the princess doesn't care much and suggests they should even hire maids, exciting Bell as he thinks of the possibility of a harem plot. Estia becomes jealous and takes back the offer, saying she will not give him another opportunity to cheat on her. Bell overhears some ugly bitches making noise by the gate, so he decides to check and sees they are Cassandra and Daphne. Cassandra comes to get her pillow, and after Bell gets it for her, the two girls begin to whisper to each other, making him wonder what they are talking about. They mention that they will see him the next day, surprising him, and they inform him about the recruitment offers Estia published around the city. The next day, many people across different races come to show their interest, and while Estia addresses them with all her energy, Makoto is busy wasting her time. While she searches through her clothes, she comes across a letter Estia is trying to hide from them, and on reading it, she immediately runs out to where she is to show her. She becomes ashamed as she reads that they are 200 million in debt, which, when the audience hears about, they flee immediately. Bell becomes shocked as he discovers the debt was accrued from his Estia knife. He realizes he's been fighting with 200 million without knowing, and he instantly faints. Following this, Estia apologizes to everyone while Bell is still on the sick bed for keeping this from them, but tells them not to worry about it anyway as she would pay it off alone, even though she's broke and has no source of income. She soon leaves in embarrassment, and after a while Bell wakes up, He and Welf go to the bathhouse, and while they bathe, they start talking about the chicks. Meanwhile, the girls are eavesdropping as Belle talks nicely about them, and Estia gets so excited that she tries climbing over to meet him for some plot development. Afterward, while they have dinner, Estia, having considered how dead broke she is, asks for everyone's help as opposed to her initial decision to pay the debt all alone. As they later enjoy themselves, Mikoto hears a knock and goes to open the door only to see it's Chigusa. She tries to call her in for dinner, but Chigusa whispers some unknown messages to her, shocking her. Later that night, Mikoto dismisses herself early, only to sneak out later, but Belle and others already noticed something suspicious earlier, so they begin to tail her without her knowledge. Mikoto soon meets Chizuga, and they both head to the Pleasure Quarter, a city where hose sell faster than clothes, surprising Belle and his team as they wonder what these girls came to do here. As they continue tailing them, some beautiful angels advertise themselves to Belle, but Lily protects him like an elder sister. However, she and Welf hasten up upon realizing that they are almost losing sight of the two girls, leaving Belle behind, who has already been captured by a hoe. A few moments later, Welf and Lily meet the two girls and ask them what's up. Mikoto reveals that they heard that a close childhood friend is now working there, so they decided to come and see for themselves, to know what happened to her to have chosen such a wonderful career path. Meanwhile, Belle manages to escape from the lady, but he misses his way. As he walks through the city, he notices a renard, and as he wonders what a fox-type animal person is doing at brothel, he suddenly meets Hermes, who seems to have also come to have some fun with mortals. Hermes tells him not to tell anyone he saw him here. He gives Belle a potion of aphrodisiac to make clapping easy for him tonight. Hermes leaves immediately and shocked. Belle also tries to follow but busts into Aisha, who offers to have a taste of his meat as she suffocates him with her melons. Some other girls appear, and one of them recognizes he was the one at the war game, making him more attractive, so they begin to fight to have him for the night. They take him home to meet Ishtar, the goddess of love, but she tells them she doesn't do inexperienced men with little sausages.
Emotional, damn it!
The girls take him to a waiting room since there is no free room yet, and while they tell him the naughty things they will do to him, one ugly, creepy-looking fatso named Fryn appears and also shows her interest in tasting his magnum. It was then Belle knew he was done for.
It was at this moment that he knew he fucked up.
As the ladies argue about who to get cultured with him, he sneaks out and runs while they chase after him. He runs with all his might and soon finds himself in the room of the Renard he saw earlier. Thinking he is a customer, she introduces herself as Haruhime and starts to make advances to him, ready to wiggle his sausage, but she shockingly discovers he is not a customer, and she immediately apologizes. She asks him why he is in such a place, and he narrates his predicament to her. She tells him to stay till dawn, and she will show him a secret way out of the Pleasure Quarter. Meanwhile, Hermes delivers a package to Ishtar, and as they talk, she asks him about Freya's weakness, but he refuses to say much. However, the idiot soon falls for her dancing. Belle and Haruhime get talking, and they discover they both have a liking for reading hero stories. However, Haruhime reveals that she is no longer worthy of reading the stories as she has become a hoe, having eaten too many sausages, and a hoe is a symbol of a hero's destruction. Belle goes speechless, and the next day dawns, so she immediately takes him to a safe place where he can escape. Meanwhile, Hermes feels terrible that he couldn't stop himself from revealing that Freya really likes Belle, whom Ishtar has decided to capture to provoke her. Upon returning to his familia, Estia rebukes him for staying over at Pleasure Quarter till morning while having an aphrodisiac in his possession. He explains what happened, but Estia still gives him punishment to help in environmental cleaning. Later, as he carries out his punishment, thinking about how mad he got, his goddess, Mikoto, Welf, and Lily appear to apologize for putting him in such a mess. He asks Mikoto what she went to do at the Pleasure Quarter, and she tells him she went to check on her friend, who is a Renard. Belle is surprised and asks if her name is Haruhime, shocking Mikoto. He narrates what happened, and Mikoto realizes that the rumor she heard was true. Belle gets sober, but Lily snaps him out of his thoughts, telling him not to even dare think of trying to save Haruhime, as it would be a lot of burden on the Estia after they had just fought in the war game, and Mikoto and Welf agree with this. Following this, Belle visits Aiden at the guild to inquire about what she knows about the Ishtar familia, and she explains all she knows to him. She then adds that the Ishtar familia are more dangerous than they look, warning him to be wary of them. He heads back home thinking that Lily's warnings are valid after all. He heads into a library to pick a book on hero stories, and as he goes through, he remembers what Haruhime was saying the previous day about her predicament. That night, while Haruhime sits down waiting for the next customer, Mikoto appears and calls her, but she pretends not to know her and stands up to leave. The next day, Mikoto tells Belle about how Haruhime rejected her, and then narrates their childhood experiences together, which is why she wants to save her. As they talk, they see Irma spying on them, who, on realizing they've seen, greets them and immediately attempts to leave, but they stop him, and Belle asks him if he knows a lot about the Pleasure Quarter. They head to a nearby bar to discuss, and Irma suggests that they can purchase her since she is a plot development expert. But his mood changes when they tell him Haruhime is a Renard. He then tells them he is revealing this information because they aren't his friends. He reveals that the package he delivered to Ishtar was a ritual stone. However, the two idiots are clueless about what that is and still plan to save Haruhime anyway. Meanwhile, at the Ishtar Familia's mansion, Ishtar orders her subordinates to capture Belle immediately to provoke Freya. Following this, Belle and his Tell visit the dungeon to isekai as many beasts as possible, because they need the money to save Haruhime. Meanwhile, Ishtar's subordinates are laying an ambush for them. Aisha suddenly activates a strange magical power with Haruhime's aid, and as Belle continues slaying monsters, he draws him into a separate place. She begins attacking him at an insane speed, shocking him as he barely dodges them, making him wonder if she is also level 3 like him. She soon knocks him to the ground and attempts to strike him with her weapon, but Mikoto luckily arrives to save him. They both then charge at Aisha, who skillfully deflects their attacks and lands a powerful kick on Belle that sends him crashing to the ground. He immediately gets back on his feet and attacks her again, but she overpowers him and uses his body to clean the dirty walls of the cave before knocking him to the ground again. In his weak state, he sees Mikoto lying unconscious, and as he tries to summon his strength, Fren appears and delivers a knockout blow. A few moments later, Haruhime realizes that Belle was their target the whole time, making her sad. Following this, Fren steals Belle and locks him away in her secret chamber, as she plans to have his meat all to herself. Meanwhile, Haruhime overhears Aisha ordering the others to find Belle before the ugly toad devours him, and immediately heads to Mikoto's jail to give her the keys secretly. Fren approaches Belle, already salivating. She licks his face, and while he continues to struggle, she grabs his rod down there but realizes that it's not parallel to the ground, so she leaves to get medicine that will help him. Belle, realizing he is in trouble, attempts to free himself, but Haruhime arrives and loses him. She then takes him out through a secret passage. Meanwhile, Mikoto also escapes and starts looking for Belle, but she comes across a strange room where she sees a book that explains the stone ritual that occurs on the night of the full moon and how Haruhime will be sacrificed for this purpose. Meanwhile, as Haruhime leads Belle through the secret passage, he worries that she may be in trouble since she is leading him out, and she replies that she already accepted whatever the punishment may be. He then reveals their intention to buy her, which instantly brings tears to her eyes that they love him that much. Meanwhile, Estia meets the Takemikazuchi Familia and tells them about the incident with Belle and Mikoto. While they wonder why they were kidnapped, Estia mentions Belle talking about the strange stone, shocking Tak as he hears this. Estia wonders what his stupid display is all about, and he explains that the stone gives the user access to powerful Renard magic, known as Jojutsu. He also adds that the ritual takes place on the night of the full moon, which happens to be that night. After leading him to safety, she prepares to return to the Pleasure Quarter, but Mikoto suddenly arrives, quite worried. She reveals she knows about the strange stone and how she will be the sacrifice, shocking her. Aisha suddenly appears and grabs Haruhime away from them. Mikoto asks why she is doing this, and Aisha reveals it's because they want to war against the Freya Familia. Belle quotes some motivational quotes he learned from watching Andrew Tate's videos, but Aisha doesn't buy them and instead damages his self-esteem through some piercing insults. She immediately orders her girls to capture him before he continues his crap talk. However, Mikoto pulls him away and runs off with him. They soon find some place to hide, but while they hide, Belle thinks about how much of a coward he is for running away instead of standing up as a hero. The Ishtar girls soon get tired of searching, and Mikoto tells him that it's time to leave, but he replies that he has to go back to save Haruhime, shocking her. She initially objects to this, telling him that this might cause a war between the Ishtar Familia and Estia Familia, but finally agrees to join him when she sees his determination. They head back towards the Ishtar Familia mansion, and before they split up, Mikoto brings out 2 signal flares, telling him that she will fire them after she comes in contact with Haruyumi. Green means she has gotten her out successfully, and red means she failed. Belle tells her they need to find the place where the ritual is being held and destroy the ritual stone if this may change Haruyumi's fate. They split up, and Belle starts making a Barbie out of the Ishtar girls to distract the Ishtar familia and buy time for Mikoto to sneak in to save Haruyumi. Estia, her familia members, and the Tak familia also use this opportunity to get into the city while Mikoto heads for the Hanging Gardens, where Haruyumi is being held hostage. Freen receives the report that Belle is causing chaos and goes to inform Asha, so Asha and her fellow ugly bitches immediately start to prepare for the ritual while Freen goes to handle Belle. She suddenly appears and unleashes powerful attacks that overwhelm him. He tries counterattacking with Firebolt, but he realizes it's useless. Freen continues making a mess of him, hitting him off to where Aisha is. Aisha and Freen then prepare to fight him, but Ishtar appears and stops them. She dismisses them and tries to charm him with her love magic, but it doesn't affect him, shocking her, so she decides to check his status report. She is more shocked when she discovers he has the ability called Lyra's Freeze, which prevents divine charms from working on him. Meanwhile, Freya receives a report about the Ishtar familia holding Belle hostage, and she decides to go see for herself also. Belle manages to escape, annoying Ishtar because she couldn't taste his sausage. Meanwhile, Haruyumi is led to the top of the Hanging Gardens for the commencement of the ritual. However, Mikoto suddenly attacks, but as she tries persuading her to escape, she refuses, saying she is not worthy of being saved. An enemy suddenly attacks, which throws Mikoto off the tower, so she immediately fires a red signal indicating she failed. However, she doesn't give up and begins mounting the building again. Aisha and others arrive, and they start the preparation of the ritual, but Mikoto is just a pain in the ass. She disrupts the process again, and Samura decides to take care of her, knocking her to the ground. Freen, realizing that Belle is hiding somewhere close by, calls out to him, telling him to come and save his useless friend before she dies. The ritual activates, and on seeing this, Mikoto thinks of what to do. She remembers her master's words and immediately enters sumo wrestling mode as she grabs Samira and unleashes a powerful magic attack, which causes an explosion. She quickly jumps off the tower, leaving the Belle to handle the rest. Seeing this, Freen orders that they isekai Haruyumi immediately, but Belle quickly runs and flings off the dagger containing the ritual stone before it is used on her, damaging it. Meanwhile, the Freya familia decides to open a new branch of Hell in Ishtar City, and the members of the Ishtar familia begin to run around, wondering if the devil paid a surprise visit. Ishtar becomes scared upon realizing this could be Freya, but on the other hand, Freya longs to see her so they can have some fun. Meanwhile, Freen gets really mad that Belle has stopped the ritual, and she croaks like a toad before launching a powerful attack that knocks the little god to the ground. Haruyumi decides to activate her divine powers, immediately empowering Belle to become stronger. He suddenly matches Freen's strength with level boosting, and the two engage in an intense fight. At the same time, Oturil and Freya's other men are on their way to cut off all escape routes, so that no one escapes from Hell, and on their way, Oturil sees Mikoto lying down wounded, so he pours some healing potion on her, healing her immediately. The fight continues between Belle and Freen, and he manages to land a slash on her unattractive face, getting her angrier. She exerts more strength as she fights, but Belle also aggressively lands a more overwhelming strike that crashes her into the ground below. However, he has to contend with Aisha before he can finally save Haruyumi. He waits till the level boosting wears off and an intense battle begins. Meanwhile, Ishtar is trying to escape like a coward, but Freya crosses her. She sends her subordinates to attack her, but Freya charms them, and on seeing this, Ishtar becomes more scared and runs the other way. The fight between Belle and Aisha continues, even though Aisha seems to be talking more than she is fighting. After a series of exchanges, they both unleash their ultimate techniques, which overwhelm their weapons and destroy them. However, Belle quickly follows it up with Firebolt, knocking Aisha out instantly. Ishtar soon reaches the edge of the building as she tries to escape, and being out of escape ideas, she tries to attack Freya, but Freya dodges and smacks her ugly face, throwing her off the building. She hugs the ground and immediately gets summoned to Nirvana, never to return to the lower world. Belle finally saves Haruyumi and reunites with his familia. Afterward, the kingdom of Rakia begins to attack Aurario, but they lose in all the battles, no matter how many times they attack, annoying the kingdom's general. Estia catches Belle and Haruhime acting all lovey-dovey and gets jealous, so she calls a familia meeting to pass a new law that no male and female are allowed to flirt, except the goddess, but Lily finds this ridiculously stupid, as she thinks that mortals aren't allowed to love each other, but they can love deities. Estia asks Belle how he'd feel if a goddess were to confess her love to him, and the dickhead, not understanding she's shooting her shot, replies that he will refuse as he is not worthy to date a goddess. She fumes up and runs off embarrassed. Following this, some folks treat the wounded soldiers of the Kingdom of Rekia, and there's one stupid idiot selling weapons of war, but tested on tomatoes to prove their quality. Meanwhile, the general of the kingdom, frustrated that he's been losing to Aurelio, decides to go to Aurelio by himself and plans to hold a god hostage to get Aurelio to surrender. Belle starts looking for Estia, and after searching for a while, he meets some single-ass gods who begin to give him relationship advice. In a bid to stay away from Belle, Estia gets a gig to take some bags of potato snacks outside the city, and on her way out, the general of Rekia and his men capture her. Belle soon learns that his goddess has been stolen, so he and Asfi head towards Rekia to save her. They soon catch up with the cowardly general, and while he prepares to fight Eyes, Belle sneaks off to get his goddess, but before he can get to her, she slips and falls off the cliff. Seeing this, Belle immediately jumps after her, and both fall into a stream. Following this, Belle and Estia are accommodated at the mayor's house in the mountain village after Eyes saves them from the water. However, Estia has a fever. Belle takes care of her. The next day, while he walks through the village, he comes across a shrine with a black dragon scale, and he is surprised. The villagers worship the dragon scales as it is the reason why monsters do not attack their village. Monsters are too scared to even come close to a dragon scale. This amuses Belle as he thinks that the same dragon responsible for the destruction of a nation protects another. But Ace ain't feeling none of this fairy tale crap. On returning to his room, Belle surprisingly meets the old mayor hovering over his goddess. The man asks to talk with him for some time, and he narrates an autobiography of his pathetic life about how he used to have a goddess too, whom he really loved but couldn't protect. She was isekai'd while trying to save him, and she got summoned back to heaven. Ever since then, he has been living in regret. He advises Belle to protect Estia so that he won't end up with regrets like him. Later that night, following all the advice he's gained from the mayor and the gods, he decides to treat Estia better by giving in to whatever she wants. As they dance, Rina comes, reporting that her father is about to die, and they quickly head to his room. They spend his final moments with him, with Estia assuring him that he will meet with his goddess again. After he dies, Belle meets Estia to ask her if the late mayor will really meet the goddess in heaven, but she tells him it might be difficult as souls return to a pure white state after they return to heaven. He remains skeptical about the love between mortals and gods because men will die and leave the immortal gods behind, which can be very painful. However, she assures him that she will be with him forever, and even if death separates them, she will come looking for him no matter how long it takes. After this, they pay their last respects to the late mayor and return to their country. One day, Belle encountered a terrified monster girl on the 19th floor of the dungeon, and instead of slaying her, he protected her from a fire-breathing bird. The next moment, he heard the sound of other adventurers approaching, so he covered her with his cape. The leader of the adventurer group asked if he'd seen a monster matching the girl's description, and he told them no. Not long after the group left, his friends arrived and scolded him for running off without them when he knew how dangerous it was. Horimi was the first to notice the girl, but when she asked Belle who she was, he insisted he would explain everything after they returned to the 18th floor. Once they arrived, Lily demanded answers, but the way she spoke spooked the girl so much that she backed away. Unfortunately, she tripped over a rock and fell, causing Belle's cape to fall off her head and revealed her face to the group. Immediately, they jumped back like they had been burned and pulled out their weapons, aiming them at the girl. Wolf asked Belle if his brain cells had finally stopped functioning, and that was why he'd been stupid enough to bring a monster into their midst. Belle tried to explain why he'd done it, but Lily cut him off, saying his cultured monster fetish was going to send all of them to Hades. The others then asked him to step away from the girl and allow them to slay her, but he refused. Suddenly, the girl said his name, surprising everyone, but Haruhime recovered quickly and asked Belle where he'd picked the girl from. He'd explained that when he found her, she was trembling and crying as she was being chased by some adventurers, so he decided to help her. Lily told him to stop thinking with his hanging flagpole and consider the consequences his actions would bring to their familia once people discovered they were sheltering a monster. Still, Bell insisted that he wouldn't abandon the poor girl, so they put their weapons away and asked what his plan was. He told them he wanted to take her to the surface, as she would only be attacked again if he left her behind. Unknown to them, Fels, the cloaked mage serving Oranos, was watching them through a magic crystal. He informed Oranos that they were taking the monster girl out of Babel, and asked if he wished to stop them. Oranos said he would like to observe the Estia Familia and see if they would become the beacon of hope he was looking for. That night, Estia chewed Bell out for being an unrepentant simp and coming back home with a talking female monster. However, when she saw how terrified the girl was, she calmed down and apologized for acting like a grumpy old hag. She then asked the girl what her name was, and she said her name was Belle since she had an IQ in the negatives. This made them realize that she didn't have a name, so Estia told Belle to give her a name. Belle suggested a few names, all of which sounded almost as dumb. In the end, Estia picked one of the names and shortened it to Ween, and since the girls seemed to like the name, they agreed to call her that. Estia then ordered everyone to find out what they could about Ween because they needed to know if others were like her. The next day, the members of the Estia Familia and Estia herself visited Hephaestos, Maich, and Takemikazuchi to ask them about talking monsters. Unfortunately, none of the gods had ever heard of monsters that could speak, so they couldn't be of help. Wolf went to the guild to see if he could find out anything, and while he was there, he overheard some adventurers talking about armed monsters. According to them, the monsters had attacked adventurers in the middle floors of the dungeon and stole their armor. As they talked, one of the guild's receptionists put up a poster of a lizardman clad in armor and holding a sword. Meanwhile, Lily went to a tavern disguised as a golden-haired elf and tried to get information from the bartender, but he told her he knew nothing about talking monsters. Lulun, a member of the Hermes Familia, happened to overhear what Lily had asked the bartender. Since she was money-hungry, she offered to tell Lily what she knew for a price. Lily handed her a bag of coins, and Lulun told her that some adventurers had reported hearing multiple voices talking inside the dungeons. These rumors had caught the interest of a particular group, and they had made it their mission to track down these monsters. Lily asked if she knew the group's identity, and Lulun said no, stating that she was looking into it. She then tried to find out which familia Lily was associated with, but Lily refused to play her game and left the tavern. However, Lulun decided to tail her, hoping to find out who she was, but Lily sensed her presence and gave her the slip. At the Estia Familia mansion, Haruhime and Belle ate lunch with Ween in the garden, and the young girl was pleased with each bite of food she took. After lunch, they played with her for a while, but when an excited Ween grabbed Belle's arm, she accidentally clawed him. When she realized what she'd done, Ween started crying while Haruhime rushed to get the medical kit. After she left, Ween stared at her bloody hands and Belle's injured arm in fear, but Belle assured her that everything was fine. How he smiled at her lifted her spirits, so she stopped crying and jumped on him to hug him. When Haruhime returned, she met them hugging and decided not to interrupt their happy moment. Later that day, after the others returned from their mission, Haruhime served them dinner, and the girls took turns feeding Ween. Lily was the only one who didn't interact with her, as she preferred to continue acting like a cliché tsundere. After dinner, they took Ween to the bathroom and washed her up, and while they did that, the clueless girl asked why Belle wasn't with them. They explained that he was a male and therefore couldn't bathe with them because it would be very inappropriate. After scrubbing their bodies, they all sat in the hot bath to relax, and Haruhime noticed that Lily was soaking, so she asked why. Lily pointed out that aside from Ween, she was the only one built like a runway, and she hated it. The other girls sighed at how silly she sounded, while Ween said she didn't want to be away from Belle anymore. Before they could stop her, she bolted out of the water and ran to find Belle, who screamed in surprise when he saw Ween in her birthday suit. After their bath, Welf filed Ween's claws down, and the young girl was glad she could finally touch Belle without hurting him. However, Lily, otherwise known as the Grinch, pointed out that Ween's claws would grow again. This made Ween ask Lily why she always acted like she had a stick stuck up her backside. Lily argued that she didn't, and somehow the conversation shifted to everyone saying how much they loved Belle. Later that night in Belle's room, he asked Ween where she came from and if she had a family like her. Ween told him she didn't know and said all she could remember was that she was alone in a dark place. She told him of the dream she had where she was fighting some adventurers who were trying to take her life. The dream had terrified her because there were dead bodies everywhere, and for some reason, her dream self was furious. Eventually, she began to feel cold and empty inside until everything turned dark and she was alone. At the same time, a man named Deeks was informed by the adventurers who had been hunting Ween that they had lost sight of her. He called them a bunch of incompetent fools and said that their failure to bring Ween in would cost him a lot of money. He was so pissed that he stabbed the monster that was locked up in the cage behind him to death. He then instructed them to return to Babel and look for Ween, stating they were not to return until they found clues about her whereabouts. After they left, he turned to face Icolos, the god they were in contact with, and asked him to help in the search. Icolos simply cackled like a madman and told Deeks he was an impudent fool for speaking to him like he was one of his pea-brained lackeys. However, Deeks didn't care and told Icolos to put his powers to use and find out if anyone was hiding Ween. Icolos only agreed to do as he asked because he found the things Deeks did entertaining. The next day, Estia suggested that Belle and the others go into the dungeon to find more clues about Ween. Belle, Welf, and Lily said they would go, but Welf pointed out that they needed a guild. This was why they paid Ryu a visit at the restaurant where she and Sir worked and asked her to accompany them to the dungeons. While they were talking, Aisha, who could pass as Princess Jasmine's long-lost baddie twin sister, walked up to them. Once she learned that Belle and his friends needed a guide, she offered to go with them, which annoyed Ryu. She didn't like the idea that a shameless skank like Aisha would spend time with Belle. Aisha even made things worse by telling Belle that after they returned from the dungeon, he would pay her in kind since she failed to get a taste of his packed sausage before. Tired of watching Aisha act like a $2 hoe, Ryu threw a stick at her and told her to be careful of what she said to Belle. She then told Sir to inform their employer that she would be late as she had to ensure that Aisha didn't attempt to make plot with Belle. Later in the dungeon, Aisha and Ryu tried to outdo one another by slaying every monster coming their way. While they argued about who had the highest kill count, two monsters resembling Ween attacked the group. Welf fought one of them off, but when Belle faced the second one, he hesitated because it reminded him of Ween. In the end, Ryu slays the monster and points out that Belle was behaving like a little. A little while later, Belle and Welf moved to the 19th floor, leaving Ryu, Aisha, and Lily in Lavira. They had told Aisha and Ryu that they would return after exchanging some items for cash, but they didn't believe their story. Aisha tried to make Lily spill the tea, but Lily remained tight-lipped, refusing to disclose where the boys had gone. Meanwhile, Belle and Welf returned to the exact spot where Belle found Ween, and just like they expected, there was nothing there. On her way back to the 18th floor, they encountered a cloaked figure that moved like it was floating and not walking. The person told them that they smelled like her kindred and asked if they were the ones who abducted them. This made them take a defensive stance, but she didn't attack them and said they didn't smell like blood. She then asked if they believed monsters and humans coexist, and began talking about how she wished she could spread her wings in the sun. She jumped in the air before the boys could react and disappeared behind the thick fog blanketing the area. The only evidence that she'd been there were the feathers she left behind, making them realize that she was a monster. Eventually, they continued walking and passed by Deeks and his crew on their way. One of Deeks' people told Deeks that Belle had been there the day they were hunting Ween, so he ordered them to keep an eye on Belle. A few hours later, Belle and the others returned to the surface, and after they parted ways with Ryu and Aisha, Lily asked what they had discovered on the 19th floor. Welf told her that they would explain everything once they got home, which confused her. Belle then said he needed time to gather his thoughts and let them alone. Icolos called out to him as he roamed the streets, lost in thought of who the mysterious monster could be. Belle turned to face the pitiful excuse of a god, and he asked Belle if he knew anything about a talking monster. The question surprised Belle, but he schooled his features, and just as he was about to respond, Irma's arrived. He calmly asked Belle to leave as he had business to discuss with Icolos, so Belle did. Once they were alone, Irma's told Icolos that he was aware that his familia was smuggling monsters, and that they had ties with the dark faction known as Evolus. Icolos laughed and swore that he had nothing to do with what his familia was doing with the monsters. He revealed that he was just a figurehead for them, and that they ordered him around like a servant. Irma's reminded him that he was a god, but Icolos told him that if he tried to stop them, they would only break their contract with him and find another god to work with. However, he told Irma's that he wouldn't interfere with his investigations and said he could do whatever he wanted. That night, Ween hid in Belle's room because she was playing hide-and-seek with Horimi. While there, she overheard Estia speaking with the rest of the familia. Welf revealed that other intelligent monsters like Ween were in the dungeon and told them about his and Belle's encounter with one of them earlier that day. This made Lily propose that they return Ween to the dungeon, as keeping her with them could put them in trouble. Makoto didn't like her idea and told her so, but Lily stood by her belief. She argued that if they decided to keep Ween with them, a day would come when she would expose them to danger. Everyone knew what she was saying was logical, but none of them wanted to admit it because they had grown fond of Ween. They heard a door slam the next moment and rushed to investigate, but Ween was long gone by then. She ran through the town in tears as she tried to understand why it was wrong for her to stay with Belle. At the same time, Belle returned home and Estia told him what happened, so he rushed out to search for Ween. A few hours later, Ween saved a young girl from getting crushed by some crates. However, instead of thanking her, the girl ran away in fear. This was because she'd noticed Ween's wings, so she immediately assumed she was a vicious monster trying to do her harm. The people present also fled in fear, but a few stayed back and began throwing things at Ween. The poor girl became scared and started wishing that Belle would come to her rescue, and he did. But Welf didn't let him go to her. He pointed out that it would ruin his reputation if he rushed to save a monster, but Belle refused to listen to him. Just as he ran towards Ween, Lily rushed past him in her elf form and told him to meet her in the secret room in the cellar. She then grabbed Ween and ran away from the place as the people chased after them. The others stayed behind with Belle, and he told them they would meet Lily in the cellar at home. And when they got there, Ween kept hugging Belle. She asked if it was wrong for her to be with him, but Belle didn't respond, and that only made her cry as his silence was all the answer she needed. The next day, the guild was swamped by angry citizens who demanded that they do something about the monster they saw the previous night. Aina tried to calm them down, but none of them listened to her, and they kept insisting that they give in to their demands. Just then, another guild receptionist walked up to Aina and informed her that the head of the guild was looking for her. Immediately, she went to his office, and the man handed her a sealed envelope, which he instructed her to give to Belle. He said she wasn't to ask questions, as the envelope contained instructions for a secret mission the guild was tasking the Estia Familia with. Later that day, Aina delivered the envelope to Belle and told him that since it was a mission from the guild, he and his familia could not refuse it. Belle opened the letter and was shocked when he read it, because the contents asked the Estia Familia to take Ween to the 20th floor of the dungeon. When he returned home later, he gave the letter to Estia, and while she read it, the others pointed out that the guild must have been aware that Ween was with them from the beginning. However, they found it strange that instead of arresting them, they wanted them to take Ween back to the dungeon. Belle felt bad for dragging them into such a mess, but they told Belle they would become disposable NPC meat shields, meant to develop his character arc, so he had nothing to apologize for. Belle then went to ask Ween if she would go with them to the dungeon, and she told him that as long as he was going to be there, she would go even if she was afraid. That night, while Belle, Ween, and the others entered the dungeon, Estia met Fels in a deserted part of town. This was because, in the letter the guild had given Belle, there was a secret message written on it for Estia. Fels took Estia through a hidden passageway, but when he reached a point, he asked her to continue the journey alone. Estia did as he instructed and kept walking until she reached the room where Uranus, Oranos, was waiting. Estia wasn't surprised to see the old geezer, as she'd already suspected he had something to do with the mission, since he was the patron god of the guild. Meanwhile, Belle and the others fought and defeated every monster that tried to attack them on their way to the 20th floor. When they stopped to catch their breath, Makoto told Belle that all the monsters they had encountered had been trying to attack Ween, not them. Belle said he'd also observed that, and assured Makoto that he would do his best to keep Ween safe, no matter what happened. Back in Oranos' secret room, Estia demanded that ugly old fart tell her everything he knew about the talking monsters, and he agreed. Not long after that, Belle and the others arrived at the location the guild marked for them on a map, but they didn't see anyone there. They were on the verge of turning back when Ween told them she could hear a voice singing. Belle then closed his eyes to listen, as if doing so would suddenly increase his hearing to the same level as that of a werewolf. Surprisingly, it worked, and he told the others that he could also hear singing. Ween then walked over to a large stone, and after she touched it, she informed them that the person was behind it, so Welf broke the stone. Behind it was a dark, empty cave, which Lily later confirmed was an unexplored part of the dungeon. They then walked inside the cave, and since they were yet to watch solo leveling, they had no idea that walking into an unexplored part of a dungeon was a one-way mission. Soon after they entered the cave, Belle announced they were being watched, so everyone became cautious. The next moment, a lizard man dressed in armor and holding a sword attacked Belle, forcing the lamp he held to drop. The lizard man then stomped on the lamp, plunging the cave into darkness, But when they began to hear other voices, Lily sprinkled some glowing moss around. This allowed them to see that armed monsters surrounded them, and the next thing they knew, the lizard man commanded the monsters to attack Ween. Belle and Welf fought them off, but there were too many of them, and the ones they didn't fight attacked the girls. When Belle noticed that Ween was using her wing to protect Haruhime and Lily, he tried to go to them, but the lizardman slammed him into the wall. It then charged at the girls, but Mikoto and Welf blocked its attack, and as they struggled against it, Belle channeled magic into his fist and punched the lizardman. The force of the punch sent it flying into a nearby wall. However, this wasn't One Punch Man and Belle was not Saitama, so the punch didn't cause any damage to his cold-blooded enemy. The most shocking part was that the lizardman started laughing, which made them wonder if its brain had been reset after he hit the wall. A bird woman then went to stand by him, and when she spoke, Welf and Belle recognized her as the mysterious monster they had met on the 19th floor. The lizard man apologized to the group and told them they had been testing them to see if they would protect Ween if she was attacked. Back in the secret room, Uranos told Estia that the purpose of the mission was to deliver Ween to the hidden village, where other talking monsters like her lived. He also told her he wanted the Estia Familia to be the bridge between monsters and humans, and help bring about the new era of coexistence. Back in the cave, the lizardman introduced himself as Lid and offered his hand to Belle for a handshake. Belle hesitated to take his hand because of his sharp claws, but he changed his mind and grew a pair of steel balls after he looked at Ween. This made the other monsters cheer, and before Belle knew what was happening, he was surrounded by monsters asking for handshakes. Ray the bird woman approached Ween, asking for her name, so Ween shyly told her what it was. Ray welcomed her and said they would ensure that they protected her from those who wished to harm her. Out of curiosity, Belle asked what they were, and Lyde said they were a species of monsters who possessed intelligence and were called Xenos. After all the introductions, the Xenos threw a feast for Belle and the others, but as they wined and dined, they couldn't help but wonder if they had accidentally been isekai'd without Truck-kun's permission. Lyde was very excited to have Belle around, but while he was speaking to him, a gargoyle named Gross interrupted him. Gross told him to stop being a complete kiss to someone who wouldn't hesitate to turn him into a Gucci belt, but Led defended Belle. This shut Bros up, but didn't stop him from glaring at Belle, so Lid apologized for his behavior, stating that he was like that because of how humans treated them. Welf and Lily then slid down to where Belle sat and asked Led if it was true that the guild knew of their existence. Lyd explained that even though the guild often delivered them food and other necessary supplies, they weren't aware of their existence since they only dropped those things off because Uranos asked them to. Speaking of the almighty Uranos, Estia told him that he was only talking about humans and monsters coexisting because his senses had taken leave of him. Uranos argued that it wasn't so, and said that the Xenos were a peaceful group that wished to interact with humans. He also said they were treated as outcasts and often attacked by other monsters because of their intelligence. Estia sympathized with the Xenos but told Uranos that they would become outcasts if word got out that her familia was befriending monsters. In another part of the city, Asfi met Hermes and informed him that her mission to tail Deeks and his crew was a bust. Hermes told her not to worry about it and said he was sure Deeks would do something that would help them gather the evidence they needed to accuse him of trafficking. In Deeks' hideout, Gran, one of his muscle-brained lackeys, complained about how they had not been about to find the monster's lair. Deeks reminded him that Hermes' people were on their tail and pointed out that they would be in trouble if Hermes discovered their hideout. He then suggested that they become more cautious whenever they went out, as he wouldn't halt his operations because of a meddling god. Back in Konoha, the hidden village, Light introduced Fells to Bell and his friends, and Fells revealed that he'd been watching them since the day they took Queen in. The group was surprised he could do that, so Lily asked if he was a human or a monster. Light said Fells was a former human, but that confused them, so Fells removed his hood to show them his face. They were beyond shocked when they saw that Fells was a low-budget crook. When Light told them that he was once a sage, Lily asked if he was the famous sage who successfully created the Philosopher's Stone and gained eternal light from it. Fells told her yes, and once they got over the shock, he revealed that he and Uranos had discovered the Xenos 15 years ago and decided to take care of them. Always one to seek answers, Lily asked Fells what the Xenos would benefit from their connection to him and Uranos. Ray was the one who answered her question, and she told her that with Fells' help, they could go to the surface one day. She said it was their wish to live on the surface, and Lyd added that it was because most of them had dreams of places on the surface. Using himself as an example, he said he dreamed of a setting sun every time he closed his eyes, but he'd never even been to the surface. However, he believed the dream was a memory from his past life, and he'd lived on the surface during that time. He said that not all the Xenos could speak, and those who could speak had learned to do it fast, as though they remembered it was something they used to do before. This statement made Bell remember the dream Ween told him she always had, and it was as if the pieces finally fit together. A few hours later, Bell and his friends said their goodbyes to the Xenos, and as they were about to leave, an excited Ween came running towards them. However, Lyde caught her before she could reach Bell and told her she couldn't return to the surface with them. This made her cry and scream, but Lyd didn't put her down as he walked away with Ray. Hours after Bell and the others had returned to the surface, the Xenos Lyd left Ween with informed her that it was time for them to move to a new village. On their way, Ween's sensitive ears picked up the sound of someone crying for help. When she told the others, they said it was most likely one of the kin, so Rani, a spider modeled after Black Maria's zone form, ordered her to lead them towards the direction the cry was coming from. A little while later, they found the place and the voice became louder, so Rani informed Lyd through her communication crystal. Lyde told her it would be dangerous if they went in alone, and suggested that she wait for him and the others to arrive. Rani refused, saying she couldn't stand by like an NPC while her kin cried for help. As soon as she said this, she and the others rushed to save their fellow Xenos and were shocked to find her chained to the cave wall. The bloody Xenos weakly told them to run, but they couldn't because Deeks and his band of brainless puppets had surrounded them. One of the Xenos tried to attack, but Gran cut him down, and Deeks ordered his people to capture the rest of them. The Xenos fought against the poachers trying to capture them, but they were outnumbered and most of them got slain during the fight. Gran cut off some of Rani's legs and poor Ween got knocked out by Deeks. When she woke up later, she saw her friends lying on the ground injured and Rani, who was the only one still conscious, got kicked in the face by Gran. Deeks scolded the dumb idiot for manhandling his merchandise, and then ordered the others to take Ween to their hideout. When Rani heard this, she attempted to place her spider silk on her, so that Lyd and the others could follow it like a trail of breadcrumbs and find her. Unfortunately, Deeks noticed what she was doing, so he removed the silk and ordered Gran to get rid of her, as she could be a problem for them later. As Gran prepared to carry out his order, 3 disgusting pigs begged Deeks to let them have some fun with Rani before she was axed, and he permitted them. The insult-brained degenerates then approached Rani, but she spat her venom in their faces before they could proceed with their cultured plans. It was so acidic that it burned their skin, so one of them stabbed her in retaliation. However, the wound wasn't enough to finish her off, so she laughed and slapped the idiot to the ground. She then told the remaining lowlifes that she would neither allow them to violate her body nor give them the pleasure of taking her life. As she spoke, she plunged her fingers into her chest and pulled out her magic stone, which she crushed. After her body disintegrated like a vampire who accidentally stepped in the sun, Deeks laughed and walked over to the Xenos, who was still chained to the wall, and stabbed her to death. A little while after they left, Groz and some other Xenos arrived, and all they found was the armor belonging to their dead comrades. Groz was so angry that he let out a blood-curdling roar, because that was all he could do. Meanwhile, in another level of the dungeon, Bell was attacked by an ugly werewolf which he struggled to slay. Later that day, on his way out of Babel, he met Ice and decided to speak with her, not realizing that Fells was watching him. To be precise, Fells wasn't watching him but trying to see if Deeks and his crew would enter or exit Babel. When he saw no sign of them, he informed Oranos and said they might have another way of entering and exiting the dungeon. Oranos then asked about the Xenos and Fells told him they were moving to another village. When he attempted to reach them via the enchanted crystal he'd given Lyde, he discovered their crystal wasn't working. This was because Groz had broken it, and when Lyde asked why, he said it was because he didn't want Fells meddling in their affairs. He told Lyde that it was time they stood up against the human, and said he was going to avenge the deaths of their friends. Lyde pointed out that he wasn't the Punisher, and told him that if he launched an attack against the humans, everything they had worked to achieve would be for nothing. Gross said Lyde was a fool for believing that Bell and the others wouldn't turn their backs on him. He then implored the other Xenos to join his cause and avenge their fallen comrades, and most agreed. After Gro's faction left to wage war on the humans, Lyd and those who stayed with him decided to go after them as they were worried about what would happen to their friends. Outside Babel, Bell asked Ice what she would do if she discovered that the monsters she dedicated her life to slaying had similar emotions to those of a human being. Ice told him that if a person were brought to tears because of a monster, she wouldn't hesitate to slay it. Deep down, Bell had expected her answer because Ice was programmed like an AI robot. However, he'd hoped her answer would be different. Suddenly, alarm bells went off and the voice of a guild member was heard. She informed the people that armed monsters had attacked Levira, and said no one was permitted to enter the dungeon until further notice. This order didn't sit well with the guild and the adventurers, so the head of the guild went to ask Alranos why he'd issued that order. He said that if they didn't try to subdue the monsters, things could escalate, but Alranos told him to calm his nerves. He said that if the monsters truly intended to reach the surface, they would have already done so. He then said he would entrust the Ganesha Familia with creating a team that would go to Levira and deal with the monsters. After the man left, Alranos told Fells he would participate in the mission and said he also wanted to include Bell. Fells was surprised, but Alranos explained that he included Bell in the mission to test his loyalty to the Xenos. Meanwhile, Bell rushed to the guild to get more information about what was happening in Levira, and Aina told him what the adventurers who escaped the dungeon told them. While she was speaking, another receptionist rushed over to them and told her that Alranos had summoned Bell. A little while later, a letter with a coded message about Bell's participation in the subjugation mission was sent to the Estia Familia. At the same time, Bell was being escorted to Alranos' secret room by Fells. Before arriving at the room, Fells told Bell that he would join the suppression team and go into the dungeon to find out why the Xenos were attacking people. In another part of town, Aisha met Ryu and told her that Bell was part of the team going to the dungeon. Ryu then asked why she thought it was necessary to inform her about it. Aisha said it was because there were rumors that the group responsible for the monster attack had ties with Evelys. This made Ryu say she would also go to the dungeon to help the team. Later, the Ganesha Familia gathered outside Babel, and Shakti told them their mission was to tame the monsters and bring them in alive. Unknown to them, Bell had disguised himself and was hidden within their ranks, ready to save his friends. While all that was happening, Ikelos was chilling on the rooftop of a building on Daedalus Street, and believe it or not, this psycho nutjob was amused by the chaos. Inside the dungeon, while asking about his missing kin, Gross beat the shit out of one of the scumbags who had tried to assault Randy. The man begged him to spare his life, claiming that he knew nothing about the Xenos that had been kidnapped. Gross told him not to take him for a fool and said that his body reeked of Randy's poison, so the man told him to find a door located on the eastern edge of the 18th floor. Immediately, Gross headed in that direction, but the man laughed and told himself they wouldn't be able to open the door as they didn't have a key. Meanwhile, Bell's group had already reached the 18th floor, and one of their scouts informed them that the monsters were heading east. Shakti thought it was strange they were heading in that direction, so she split their team in two. Half would head to Levira and search for survivors, while the other half would chase after the monsters. Bell joined the half that went after the monsters, and when the monsters spotted them, they chose to fight instead of run. Ryu, Aisha, and Astwe, who Irma sent to gather information, also joined the fight. During the battle, Bell encountered Lyde, so they moved to another part of the forest to talk. Lyde asked Bell why he'd come, and Bell answered his question with another. He wanted to know why they had attacked Levira, so Lyd explained what happened to Ween and the others. Bell said he would accompany Lyd to rescue Ween, but Lyd told him not to. He said the other humans would turn on him if they discovered he was helping monsters. However, Bell was confident in his plot armor and insisted he would go with him, so Lyd let out an angry roar. The next moment, Ryu popped out of nowhere, trying to attack Lyd, but he jumped back and ran off. She then turned to Bell and suggested they return to the Ganesha Familia, but Bell told her he was going after Lyd, so she gave him her bag containing magical items and told him to use them if he got into trouble. Bell thanked her for her gift and then ran in the direction Lyd had gone earlier. Speaking of Lyd, he'd already caught up with Gross and the others at the edge of the forest, but try as they may, they couldn't find the door. Deeks sensed their presence, so he tossed the key to Gran and told him to let their guests in. Meanwhile, as Bell ran to find Lyd, Fel stopped him and informed him that the Xenos had gone searching for a door on the eastern edge. By the time they arrived there, the Xenos were nowhere to be found and they couldn't see the door. Just then, something glowed inside Bell's bag, so Bell reached inside the bag to pull it out. The item was crafted to look like an eyeball, and when he passed it to Fells, the old sack of bones noticed it was reacting to the wall. This prompted him to place his hand on the wall, and almost immediately, a passage opened up, and after they stepped inside, the wall closed behind them. As they walked along the corridor, Fells decided to embody Captain Obvious and pointed out that the passage was man-made. At the end of the corridor was another door which opened when Fels held up the key. After they passed through the door, Belle noticed the name Daedalus written on the wall. Outside, the Estia Familia spied on the Ganesha Familia, stationed outside Babel's doors. They had intended to sneak in, but the security was so tight that they gave up on that plan and decided to think of another way in. Wolf suggested they find the hideout of the poachers that caused the incident, but Haruhime pointed out that they didn't know who they were. Suddenly, Lily perked up and said she knew the right person to ask about the sale of monsters. She then took them to the prison where Xanis was being held and asked him if he knew the hideout of the poachers, since he used to be in cahoots with them. So he told her to go to Daedalus Street. In the tunnel, Fels deduced that the tunnels were connected to Daedalus Street, and said that the Achelos Familia had used it to transport the monsters they captured to the surface. Meanwhile, the Xanos arrived at Deeks' hideout and rushed to free their friends locked up in cages, but Lyde noticed Ween wasn't among them. Just then, Deeks and his people revealed themselves, and Deeks asked the Xenos if they could fight against them while protecting their injured friends. Before anything could happen, Belle and Fels rushed in, surprising everyone in the room. When they all got over the shock of seeing them, Fels asked Deeks why he was using the labyrinth created by Daedalus as the base of his smuggling operation. Deeks told him he had every right to use the labyrinth however he pleased because he was a descendant of Daedalus, and just like those who came before him, he was tied to the place. He removed his goggles to reveal his eyes had a strange mark inside them, and explained that the mark represented the curse Daedalus had placed on them. Back outside, Irmas found Achelos on the rooftop, and Achelos offered to tell him everything he knew about Deeks. He said that all the descendants of Daedalus had a blood-binding curse on them, and the curse ensured that no matter what they did, they would continue building the labyrinth. Daedalus had purposely built a door that only responded to the mark in the eyes of his descendants, so that no one else would have access to the place. However, Deeks had made his people remove the eyes of his dead ancestors and turn them into keys so that they could come and go as they liked without him being present. The thing about Daedalus was that he'd lived 1,000 years ago and was the person who constructed Babel, but at some point he disappeared. No one knew he went missing because he was doing everything in his power to finish building the labyrinth, which he'd named the Knossos. His obsession with the project was the reason he cursed his descendants, and ever since then, they have continued building the place. Back in the labyrinth, Deeks revealed that he began selling monsters to raise money to build the labyrinth. An annoyed Gross said it wasn't enough reason for him to have done what he did to their kin. When he tried to attack Deeks, one of his people shot an arrow at him. Fortunately, Belle hit the arrow away before it could reach Gross, and amid the confusion, Fels threw his key to a goblin who ran out of the room. The next moment, the Xanos began charging at Deeks and his people, but Deeks surprised them by chanting a spell. Fels recognized the spell and ordered Belle to stand behind him, but the Xenos weren't lucky enough. They were hit by the spell, which was a curse, and began fighting themselves, so Fels told Belle that to break the curse he had to bring Deeks down. Belle immediately charged at Deeks, even though Deeks was a level 5 and he was just a level 3. However, Deeks wasn't at full strength because as a side effect of using the curse on the Xenos, his level dropped. Still, that didn't stop him from beating Belle to a pulp and injuring him with his enchanted spear. The wound from the spear wouldn't close even if Belle used a healing potion, and Deeks wanted to see how long Belle would last before his blood drained from the cut. As Belle tried to catch his breath, Deeks decided to bore him with another history lesson about his family. He said they couldn't escape their curse no matter what they did, and it was slowly making him lose his mind. He tried to regain control of his mind by becoming an adventurer, but it had done nothing to satisfy him. That was until he discovered the Xenos and became obsessed with hurting them, because it was the only thing that stopped the power the curse had over him. As he said this, he laughed out loud, but Belle didn't see what was funny about inflicting pain on others for personal pleasure. He told Deeks that he was sick in the head and needed to be locked up in the most secure room at Arkarm for chasing cheap thrills at the expense of the Xenos. This pissed Deeks off, so he began attacking Belle again, demanding that he take back what he said. He said Belle would never understand what it was like to constantly fight the urge to do as the curse wanted him to. He kept lamenting and taking his anger out on Belle, not giving him the chance to fight back. Outside the labyrinth, the Ganesha Familia had captured all the monsters they had been fighting except for Ray. However, they cornered her and were about to capture her, when a large minotaur named Asterius attacked them. He overpowered all of them, including Aisha, but Ryu managed to hold out against it. The low-budget Tinkerbell ignored her injuries and kept fighting until the Asterius knocked her down. It was even prepared to chop her to pieces, but stopped and walked away when it heard a howl. Back inside the labyrinth, Belle was still losing to Deeks, who said it didn't make any difference if treated the Xenos like worthless scum. Belle argued that it did, stating that the Xenos had feelings like them, but Deeks got tired of listening to him and hit him with his spear. He told Belle he was foolish for comparing monsters to humans and vowed to bring him back to his senses. He then asked him to follow him and took him to another room where Ween was being held. When Ween saw Belle, she began struggling against her chains, but Deeks grabbed her hair to hold her in place. He asked what would happen if he removed the gem on her forehead, and Ween said she would run wild. This made Deeks smile, and before Belle could react, he ripped the gem off Ween's head, causing her to scream in pain as she took on her true form. Once her transformation was complete, she charged at Belle, ramming him through the walls of the labyrinth until they emerged in the room where the others were. Deeks followed them, and as Ween used her tail to smack Belle around the room, he asked Belle if he finally understood that even though the Xenos could talk, deep down they were still monsters. Belle didn't respond to him, as there was no need to stoop to the level of a madman. Instead, he approached Ween, ignoring the pain her claws were inflicting on his shoulder, and told her not to be afraid. Somehow his words reached her, and she remembered who he was, so she began sobbing. Everyone was surprised by this, but Deeks was mad as he'd hoped Ween would get rid of Belle. He began attacking Belle again, asking why he was hell-bent on saving a monster, and Belle told him that as long as the monster was crying for help, he would do anything to save it. This made Deeks call him a hypocrite and a brainless idiot for thinking he could save both humans and monsters when he couldn't even save himself. As he prepared to plunge his spear into Belle's chest, Lyde slashed him with his sword. It turned out that Belle's words had also reached the Xenos under the curse, and they were fighting against it. Together, Lyd and Belle began fighting Deeks, while Fels and the other Xenos fought Gran and the remaining members of the Akelos Familia. During the fight, Gran got his left eye scratched out by Groz, who was proud of himself for doing so. After a few minutes of being cut by Belle and Lyde, Deeks tried to retaliate, but Belle did the thing where he channeled magic into his fist and punched Deeks in the chest. This sent him flying into a wall, and once his lights went out, the curse he placed on the Xenos was removed. Lyde excitedly praised Belle for saving them, but Belle told him it wasn't over, and as soon as the words left his mouth, Deeks stood up. It was at that moment that Fels realized that Deeks had undone the curse to restore his level and protect himself from the damage Belle's punch would have inflicted on him. Lyde tried to attack Deeks, but the snake held up Ween's gem and said he'd break it if Lyde moved a muscle. Even though Lyde did as he asked, Deeks tossed the gem, so Belle rushed to catch it before it shattered to pieces like Humpty Dumpty. As soon as Belle caught the gem, they then watched as Deeks used the curse on Ween, making her see images of Belle everywhere she looked. As if that wasn't enough, he opened a side door and left Ween to pass through it, knowing fully well that the passage led to the surface. He taunted Belle, saying that if he decided to stay behind and finish him off, he wouldn't make it in time to save Ween. Belle didn't think twice and went after Ween, so Fels went after Belle to heal his wounds with his magic. Deeks had already slipped away, so it was only the Xenos that remained in the room. Just then, Ray and the others arrived, and Groz insisted that they go after Deeks because it was a bad idea to let him escape. Ray agreed with him, but said that most of their kin were too injured to move and pointed out that even if they went after Deeks, they wouldn't catch him as the labyrinth was his domain. Since they couldn't chase after Deeks, they decided to go help Belle save Ween. However, Ween had already reached the surface and was destroying the things in her path. The Estia Familia, who were in the area because of what Sanus had told them, noticed that people were fleeing, so they rushed to find out what monster was causing the ruckus. Imagine their surprise when they saw that it was Ween. She even tried to attack them, but Belle arrived just in time to stop her. As he fought her, he tried to think of a way to return the gem to her head. Unfortunately, his brainstorming sessions were interrupted when a spear hit Ween and pinned her to the wall. When he looked up, he discovered that the spear belonged to Fend, who was standing on top of another building with the other members of the Loki Familia. Belle froze when he saw them, but he also knew that if he didn't act fast, they would dispose of Ween. After contemplating what to do for a while, he went to stand in front of Ween with his arms wide open, making everyone who was watching him think he was siding with her. Meanwhile, an injured Deeks was trying to escape the labyrinth when Asterius came from behind and chopped him in half. Back on the surface, the Loki Familia tried to move in on Ween, but Belle shot a firebolt at them. From where Irmus was watching, he told himself that Belle's actions would make the people turn on him. However, Belle surprised him when he announced that Ween was his catch, and no one had the right to touch her. While he was saying this, Ween pulled out the spear from her shoulder and made a run for it, so Belle chased after her. After they were gone, Teona asked what Belle had meant when he said Ween was his catch. Ice explained that among adventurers, it was considered a violation to step in and take another person's prey. Bedtap pointed out that those rules only applied when they were in the dungeon, so Finn ordered them to go after Ween. Before they could comply, the other Xenos emerged from the labyrinth, so they decided to take care of them first, but Finn instructed them to capture the Xenos alive. Bedtap kicked Groz out of the sky and into a wall. Tyon gave Lid a suplex and slammed his head into the ground like he was an ostrich. And Teona had fun punching a goblin into a wall. Fels tried to stop them from going after Ween by unleashing a golem on them, but Teona destroyed it with one swing of her sword. This gave Fels the feeling that the Loki Familia were the only monsters on the street. Since he was distracted, he didn't notice that Gareth was aiming for him. Fortunately, Hermes used his speed to switch Fels for Ikelos, so when the smoke cleared up, Gareth took Ikelos away. Fels thanked Hermes for saving him, and Hermes told him that he'd done it because Belle needed his help. Fels pointed out that if he went to help Belle, there would be no one to help the Xenos, so Hermes introduced him to Lulum. Down in a hidden corner, Lily tried to stop Welf from interfering with the fight between the Loki Familia and the Xenos. Just as Welf insisted that he had to do something to help the Xenos, a loud howl was heard. The next moment, Asterius emerged from the labyrinth, and as he stood before Bedtap, Teona, and Tyon, he let out a supersonic howl. The howl was so powerful that everyone covered their ears, and Horihime and Lily fainted after hearing it. He then began fighting Bedtap and the twins, but no matter what they did, they couldn't bring it down. From their hiding place, Welf watched the fight, but when he noticed that Asterius pulled out a Bejeweled ripoff of Stormbreaker, he instructed his friends to run. Suddenly, the sky became darker and the weapon was hit with lightning. But before Asterius could unleash the lightning on the Loki Familia, Riviera began chanting a protective spell. The spell created a large magic circle above the area, and when Asterius released his lightning, it absorbed it. However, the surrounding area wasn't left unaffected, and the trio he'd intended to zap had some electric currents coursing through their body. Since Asterius was unharmed, Finn ordered Ice to go down and finish him off, saying that he was too stubborn for them to take him alive. Ice floated down, and before the fight had even begun, she used a move called Aerial to cut off his right arm. She then began attacking him, so Asterius did his best to defend himself with his only arm. Ice was a ruthless swordsman, and with each blow she landed on him, she cut him. However, she wasn't spared from his attacks either, and got cut a couple of times until he pushed her back. At that point, she was becoming weak and her hand was shaking, so Gareth inserted himself in the fight and asked her to stand down. Finn also came down, but before they could tag team and attack Asterius, Lulum began dropping smoke bombs everywhere. When the smoke finally cleared, the Xenos were nowhere to be seen, as they had taken a play from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles playbook and disappeared into the sewers. Meanwhile, Ween was still rampaging through the city and Belle was hot on her tail, hoping to come up with a plan to save her. Unfortunately, he was the only one thinking about her well-being, because all the adventurers she passed on the way tried to shoot her down. Belle had to clear the way for her using his firebolt, but he didn't realize that the adventurers had strategically placed themselves in different locations so they could lead Ween to the Colosseum. Once she was trapped there, the mages that had been waiting for her used a combined lightning spell to take her down. Belle rushed to her, but the damage had already been done and sealed her fate. The spear pierced through her chest. As Belle stood screaming her name, the ground beneath them collapsed, and they both fell into the sewer below. Gran celebrated the fact that he'd slayed Ween, but he didn't get to enjoy his victory as Gross clawed him to death. Down in the sewers, Belle returned Ween's gem to her head, but that wasn't enough to repair the damage under her body. As her body began to turn to ashes, Belle cried and begged her not to leave him, but she told him it was all right. She said she was happy she got to spend her short life with him and the others, and before her magic stone broke, she told him she loved him. Belle couldn't believe she was gone and refused to leave his position, opting to remain there and cry until he was tired. However, Fels had another plan, and as Belle sobbed, he began chanting a resurrection spell. Belle was soon surrounded by a bright light that could be seen all over the city, and when it finally disappeared, Ween was back in his arms. Later on, the Xenos were reunited with Ween, and they thanked Belle for saving her. Belle told them he'd done nothing, but Fels asked him to stand tall with his head raised as he was more than worthy of being called a hero. After leaving the tunnels, Bell ran into Aina, who asked if his selfish decision was responsible for the damage the city suffered. Bell told her yes, so she slapped him for being reckless, and then hugged him for staying alive. A few days later, Aikelos was exiled from the city after everyone learned that his familia was responsible for everything that happened. However, the people also blamed Bell for destroying the city, and everywhere he went, he was shunned. This made him hide away in his room to avoid problems, but one afternoon, Hermes came to visit. He informed Bell that the Xenos were still in the city as they couldn't attempt to leave since the Loki familia were guarding the entrance to the Knossos and the Ganesha familia were guarding Babel. Estia suggested that they tell Loki, who the Xenos were, and plead with her to let the Xenos return to the dungeon. Hermes told her that even if Loki agreed to their plan, Finn would never agree. He said that the only way the Xenos would make it out of the city was if they were dead. Later that day, Bell went into town with Estia, and as expected, the people called him names and spoke to him rudely. Estia got tired of listening to them, so she told them to transfer their aggression to her, since Bell had done the things he did for her. As they continued walking around, they ran into Ice, but she didn't say a word when Estia tried to provoke her. Loki was also with her, and when she saw Bell, she tried to question him, but Estia didn't let her. While Estia stood in Loki's way, Bell left, and as he aimlessly walked about, he bumped into Sar, who asked if she could walk with him. Bell was surprised by her request, so he asked if she knew what people in town were saying about him. Sar said yes, but told him that she didn't care, so they went to sit by the lake where she bombarded him with stories about her workplace. Bell didn't say a word because he was ashamed. However, he got the courage to ask what she thought about his situation. She told him she didn't blame him for anything as she knew he never made decisions without thinking things through. She also advised him to stop acting like he was carrying the world on his shoulders and trust his familia, as they would never abandon him. Later that night, Hermes visited Oranos, and he told him that the Loki familia had begun an earnest search for the Xenos. However, he offered to help the Xenos and even presented Oranos with Daedalus' notebook, saying Akilo had given it to him. After he met with Oranos, Hermes sent Asfi to speak to Aisha and Ryu. She told them everything she knew about the Xenos and asked that they lend a hand when it was time to help the Xenos. Hephaestus, Maich, and Takemikazuchi also met to discuss the issue of helping the Xenos leave the city, but they couldn't decide if they wanted to get involved or not. Meanwhile, in the Estia Familia home, they deciphered a letter from Fels in which he stated that he would help the Xenos return to the dungeon. His letter also mentioned where they would find some magic items if they decided to help him with his plans. Estia then asked her familia what they wished to do, and Bell didn't hesitate to say he would help the Xenos. He told them he wasn't going to ask them to join him, but they surprised him by saying they would help him. The next few days was spent making preparations for the move, and when they were ready, they sent word to Fels to let him know. Fels informed the Xenos of the plan to get them out of the city, and when they asked if Bell would accompany them, he told them that Bell would act as a decoy. This made the Xenos call him names, but Fels explained that Bell acting as a decoy was the only way they could protect him. He reminded them that everyone was against Bell because of the decision he made regarding Ween, so keeping him far away from them was his redemption ticket. After his explanation, he used his communication crystal to call Bell and his friends, and together they came up with a plan. Estia told them that according to Daedalus' notes, there were 6 hidden doors to the Knossos. Since the Loki familia only knew about 4, they would have to use the other 2. The only problem was that they didn't know which of the doors were known to the Loki familia. Fels suggested they investigate and find out which doors were unguarded before they embarked on their escape. At the same time, Finn held a meeting with his familia, and he was smart enough to consider that Bell would be used as a decoy. He told his people that they were to head in the opposite direction of wherever Bell would be, as that was where they would find the Xenos. He instructed them to guard the doors to the Knossos properly because he didn't want the monsters to escape. Later that day, the plan to guide the Xenos back to the dungeon was set in motion. Meanwhile, Aina was throwing a tantrum at the guild because Bell had not come to see her since she slapped him. Eventually, she got tired of sitting down and left to search for him, but on the way she met Hermes and Asfi. Hermes invited her to have a drink with him, and while they were at the cafe, he told her that Bell wasn't at home. He said he would tell her where to find him as long as she did him a favor, and she agreed. That night, Finn double-checked his plans to make sure that everything was in order. When he was informed that Bell was spotted on Daedalus Street, Ice volunteered to go and keep an eye on him. She promised to stop him if she discovered he was up to something, so Finn let her go. In a different part of town on another rooftop, Estia and Herodum monitored the positions of their friends and the Xenos using the magical items Fels provided. Bel continued walking around, hoping to draw the attention of the Loki familia, but they ignored him. When he noticed Ice was the only one watching him, he panicked thinking something was wrong and tried to inform Estia, but a tap on his shoulder halted his actions. When he turned around, he was surprised to see Naza, so he asked what she was doing there. She told him that Mike had sent her to help him with whatever he needed, so he thanked her. Ice watched the two with a bored expression, even though she was a bit curious to find out who the woman was. After Naza left, Bel decided he needed to give Ice the slip, but before he could do so, Aisha and Ryu arrived. They told him they knew about his plans and said they had come to help him because they were worried he would get in trouble. Bel thanked them and then told them what he needed them to do. Ryu assured him they would handle the task well, but Aisha, who never failed to remind Bel that she wanted his lollipop, pushed his face between her jiggly sacks of meat. As always, Ryu demanded that she release Bel, but the naughty vixen refused and pulled him closer until Ryu tried to attack her. She dodged all her attacks and eventually ran off, but Ryu chased after her. Bel was yet to recover from their craziness when Aina approached him, complaining about how he'd ghosted her like her ex. Bel apologized and admitted that he avoided her because he was ashamed, but Aina insisted that he tell her everything that was going on. Meanwhile, Esti had guided Welf and Mikoto to the place where Fels's group was hiding. Once they found them, Lyde climbed to the surface and let out a loud howl to let their friends know that the operation had begun. The howl was returned by all the Xenos who heard it except for Asterius, but Fels assured them that he was fine. The howls confused the humans since they sounded from different parts of the city. As they began running around searching for the monsters, Bel escaped from Aina, promising to speak to her later. Aina tried to stop him by stretching out her hand, and that was when she noticed the bracelet on her hand. She remembered that Irma's had asked her to give it to Bel, but since Bel had run off, she decided to keep it and give it to him later. As Bel ran, Ice and some adventurers chased after him, but he didn't stop until he arrived at a fountain. However, when his pursuers got to the fountain, they didn't see him, and before they knew what was going on, they were hit with the stink bombs Naza released. Not only were they stinky, but they made all those who inhaled it to hallucinate. Ice was up on a roof, so she wasn't affected by the bombs, and she could sense Bel hiding nearby. When she turned to go look for him, she saw Ryu waiting for her, and to her surprise, the elf asked her to spar with her. Without waiting for Ice to accept her request, Ryu charged at her, so Ice pulled out her sword. While they fought, Hermine asked Estia if Ryu would be alright, and Estia told her that since she used her magic to boost Ryu's level, she would be fine. Later on, Lila, who was disgusted as Finn went to one of the Loki Familia bases, and ordered everyone there to go to the South Base. She also asked about the NASA's doors they were guarding, and the unsuspecting idiots revealed which doors were under their control. After hearing this, she hurried away and informed Estia about the location of the doors. Estia praised her for a job well done, and then checked the map for the closest unguarded door to where the Xenos were. Once she confirmed that the west door was the closest, she informed the Xenos and they emerged from their hiding place. Their sudden emergence caught the Loki Familia off guard, and they began to wonder why they weren't heading in the direction of any of the doors they were guarding. Just then, the group Lily had dispatched arrived at Finn's base, and when he saw them, he asked why they had come. They told him he had ordered them to come there, making him realize that they had all been played. As the Xenos made their way to the west door, Welf and Mikoto helped them fight off the adventurers in their way. Unfortunately, they hadn't anticipated that Gareth would attack them, and when he jumped down from the roof, he sent most of them flying. No one noticed that Ween fell into an underground passage, so when they recovered from their fall, Mikoto and Welf asked them to continue running. They assured them that they would keep Gareth busy and began attacking him with magical swords that produced ice. When Estia looked at her map, she noticed Ween was heading in another direction, but since there was no way to contact her, Haruhime left to find her. Ween found an opening and climbed back up to the street, but she was unlucky as it was next to where Tillman was stationed. Immediately, she ran away, hoping to find somewhere to hide, but Tiana was like a bloodhound, and she caught up with her in no time. Terrified, Ween channeled her inner Pennywise and crawled through the opening of the sewers to escape Tiana. In another part of town, Belle ran into Haruhime, so he carried her princess style and began running in the direction Estia told them Ween was. Back in the area where they had gotten separated from Ween, Welf and Mikoto continued fighting Gareth. The Lords of the Rings-inspired dwarf didn't go easy on them, and when Mikoto used her ice to hold him down, he broke free and threw his axe at her. Unfortunately, she didn't move in time and was thrown off the ledge she was standing on. Welf tried to avenge her, but Gareth attacked him with a wind strike which broke his ice blade and blew his cloak off his body, revealing him to Gareth. Elsewhere, as Ween ran, she met a young girl who tried to back away from her, thinking she would hurt her. When Taona found them, she chose to observe Ween instead of attacking. As she watched the girl back away, she noticed the arch above her start to crumble. She tried to warn the girl, but it was too late. Fortunately, hawk girl, sorry Ween saved her even though she knew the humans would misjudge her like they did before. When the dust cleared, Ween continued running, but Taona went after her. At the same time, Gareth had forced Welf into a tight spot, so he decided to use his last magic sword to fight him off. However, before he could pull out the sword, Tsubaki arrived and attacked Gareth with a mini ice storm created by her sword. Welf was surprised to see her and asked why she had come, and she told him that her master had sent her to save his scrawny little. As she spoke, she kept attacking Gareth, not giving him the chance to fight back. She then told Welf to stop staring at her like an idiot and help her, so he pulled out his last sword. Using the sword, he trapped Gareth in a block of ice so thick that only Scrat and his trusty acorn could break it. On the other side of town, Taona blocked Ween's path, but to Ween's surprise, she didn't hurt her. Taona told her she couldn't bring herself to slay her because she witnessed how she saved that young girl. She also told Ween to run as she knew that if her friends arrived, they wouldn't let her live, so Ween ran off. A few seconds after she did, Taona arrived and asked her sister where the monster she'd been chasing was. Taona admitted that she let her go, so Taona called her a dumbass idiot for doing that. Ween kept running until Belle and Harugimi found her in an alley and promised to take her to the others. The next moment, Belle sensed Bedtat approaching, so he covered all three of them with his cloak. Bedtat called out, asking whoever was in the alley to reveal themselves because even though he couldn't see them, he could smell them. So Harugimi stepped out. Bedtat demanded that the others show themselves, but Harugimi insisted she was alone and told him to leave. Belle then took Ween and escaped, leaving Harugimi alone with the angry werewolf. Annoyed that a weak mutt like her had dared to stand up to him, Bedtat stomped his foot on the ground. This made the stones move, as though he'd used earthbending, and since Harugimi wasn't expecting it, she fell. However, she refused to back down and began chanting a level-boosting spell because she knew Aisha was nearby. As soon as Aisha got to her, she was hit by the spell, and as she stood facing Bedtat, he called Harugimi pathetic for letting someone else fight her battles. Aisha assured him that she didn't mind as Harugimi was her sister and her duty was to protect her, so the two of them began fighting. While that was happening, Belle tried to get Ween across town to the other Xenos, using the cloak to conceal their presence. Unfortunately, Ice wasn't fooled by it, so Belle took off the cloak and faced her. She asked if Ween was the reason he'd spoken to her the other day about monsters and their feelings. Belle tried to make her understand that Ween was a different kind of monster, but she pulled out her sword and said her answer wouldn't change. She then attacked Belle, but he defended himself with his blades and attempted to reason with her again. Ice told him that no matter what he said, Ween was still a monster that could lose control at any moment, and it was her duty to stop that from happening by slaying her. This statement pissed Belle off, so he stopped defending and began attacking Ice. As they fought, Ice acknowledged that he'd grown stronger, but pointed out that unless he was secretly Dracula Mihawk, he'd never win against her in a fight. Belle did his best to prove her wrong, but Ice was no match for him, and eventually, he was knocked down. A concerned Ween rushed to his side to check on him, but Belle remained focused on Ice, and when she began approaching them, he used his firebolt. He ensured that he targeted the arc above her with the firebolt, so the structure came crashing down when he released the flames. When the dust cleared up, Ice discovered that Belle and Ween had pulled an avatar. Concurrently, Aisha had gotten her ass handed to her by Bedtat, and as she lay on the ground, Harugimi sobbed like a baby. Aisha told her not to worry about her as she wasn't going to die from her injuries, so Harugimi calmed down. Aisha then reminded her that she had something important to do, so Harugimi thanked her and ran off searching for Ween and Belle. Speaking of Belle, the low-budget Killua and Ween arrived at a place he remembered had a secret passageway. After confirming from Estia that the passage existed, Belle put Ween in the passage, gave her his communication crystal, and asked her to head down the path. Ween begged him to go with her, but he told her he wanted to speak to Ice, who he was sure would arrive at any moment. She tried to insist, but Bell had already made up his mind. However, he promised to find her once he was done speaking to Ice. As soon as she left, Ice arrived and demanded that Bell move so she could pursue Ween, but he refused. Not only did he refuse, but he pulled out his blades and took a defensive stance, so she attacked him. In the passage, Ween stopped running and told Estia she didn't want to be separated from Bell. She said he'd done so much for her and saved her so many times that she was beginning to think she was one of those Disney princesses and not a monster. However, she was tired of running away like a coward and wanted to return and help him. Estia asked if she was prepared to face the consequences of her decision, stating that it could lead to her death. Ween said yes and asked to call her Bruno Mars because she would catch a grenade for Bell. Outside the passage, Bell fought Ice with all his might, but she was still more skilled and stronger than he was. When she pushed him back, she asked why he was helping a monster, and Bell told her it was because Ween was different. Ice disagreed with him, and as she was about to strike him down, Ween got between them and screamed at Ice not to hurt Bell. Ice didn't like this and told Ween to shut up, after which she asked what the purpose of her existence was. She pointed out that she was genetically engineered to hurt people and nothing they did or said could change that. Instead of trying to defend herself, Ween broke off her claws and pulled out her wing, even though doing those things hurt her. It also made her lose a lot of blood, but Ween didn't care, and as Bell held her weak body to his, she promised Ice that if she ever ran wild again, she was free to send her to the afterlife. Her actions moved Ice, so the Sword Princess put her sword away and gave them a bottle of healing potion. After she left, Bell used the potion on Ween, and Estia informed him that Lily and the other Xenos who got separated from the group were coming to him. She also told him that they had a key to the Knossos and had been given directions to another door by Asterius. Makoto also called and informed Estia that Fels and the Xenos were safely in the tunnels leading to the Knossos. A little while later, Bell, Haruhime, and Lily said goodbye to Ween and her friends, promising to see them again. Meanwhile, Estia wasn't paying attention to what she was doing and accidentally dropped the notebook in a puddle of water. Immediately, she panicked, thinking she'd ruined the Thousand Year Book. However, when she picked it up, she was surprised to see that it wasn't damaged, which made her suspicious. At the same time, inside the tunnels, Fels and the Xenos came to a dead end, which left them confused. As they tried to figure out if they had taken the wrong turn, Hermes and Asphite approached them. Hermes then revealed that he'd played them all like a fiddle, admitting that the note was as fake as your girlfriend's melons. Fels asked what he hoped to achieve with his dirty tricks, and Hermes said he wanted the Xenos to die. On the other side of town, Asterius walked along the street holding his axe, and surprisingly, he didn't attack Otteral when they crossed paths. As he walked away, Otteral told him to keep moving forward as he would find the thing he'd been seeking. Upon hearing this, Asterius picked up his pace and began heading to the square. It so happened that what he was searching for was Bell, because he'd be having a dream where he fought Bell. Meanwhile, in the tunnel that was supposed to lead them to the Knossos, Fels demanded to know why Hermes wanted the Xenos to die. Hermes explained that it was the only way to restore Bell's reputation, and said that if they didn't agree to his suggestions, the Loki Familia would find them. Just then, Estia's voice came from the enchanted crystal Fels had in his hand, and she told him about the notes falling in a puddle of water. She was about to say to him that Hermes was a dirty double-crossing snake, but Fels crushed the crystal and asked Hermes what his objective was. Estia was pissed off that the communication with Fels and the others had been cut off, so she found Lily, Bell, and Haruhime and told them everything. She said she wasn't sure what the sneaky son of a gun Hermes was planning, but she could bet it wasn't something good. Suddenly, they heard a growl, and when they looked up, they saw Groz and 3 other Xenos flying towards the square. The people gathered at the square also noticed them and fled the moment the group landed. The adventurers stayed back to fight them off so the civilians could get to safety. Elsewhere, on top of a tall building, Hermes was watching the drama unfold while doing the cliché thing every evil mastermind did: narrate their plan. In Hermes's case, he manipulated everyone just so he could turn Bell into the hero he wanted him to be. When he explained his grand plan to restore Bell's honor to the Xenos, Groz volunteered to be the sacrificial lamb. Fels and the other Xenos had tried to get him to change his mind, saying Hermes' plan was as bizarre as JoJo's Adventures, but Groz refused to listen. Back in the present, Aina was helping direct the civilians out of the square when Groz noticed the bracelet she wore. The same bracelet Hermes had given to her so she could give it to Bell on his behalf. The gem on the bracelet matched the one Groz had, so he charged at her intending to slash her. Fortunately, Bell arrived and stopped Gross before he could dig his claws into her. Ana was surprised to see Bell acting as her knight in shining armor, but before she could even thank him for saving her, he ordered her to get to safety. As Bell continued blocking Gross' attacks with his blades, he noticed his eyes were bright red. This made him wonder if the gargoyle was under another curse that had made him lose his mind again. He had no idea that Gross was in his right mind and had only attacked Ana because Hermes had told him it was the fastest way to get Bell's attention. Poor Gross had no idea Hermes wanted to use him to ruin Oranos' plan to create a world where monsters and humans coexisted. He wanted to prove to the old man that 1,000 years of death, 1,000 years of hatred couldn't be undone just like that. He knew Bell would be the first person to hop on the coexistence bandwagon, and since Bell's talk no jutsu was strong, he could convince others to do the same. That was why he planned to have Bell slay Gross, so that he would be riddled with so much guilt that he would refuse to interact with Xenos again. Back on the surface, Gross kept attacking Bell, but Bell stood his ground and defended himself. However, he couldn't help but wonder what had made Gross do a complete 360-degree. After recalling how his grandfather had told him never to yield his will to others, Bell decided to stop defending himself. He put away his blade and stood with his arms spread out like he was the statue. Gross then charged at him, but at the last moment, he drew back because he'd rather die than hurt Bell. Everyone who witnessed this was stunned, and Hermes couldn't believe Bell had done the opposite of what he expected him to do. However, he wasn't ready to give up and ordered Asfi to make Gross run wild, but a loud cry was heard before she could do that. The next moment, Asterius jumped into the square and charged at an unsuspecting Bell. He only managed to push Ana out of the way before Asterius used his horns to ram him through the walls of the houses close by. When he eventually stopped, he stood staring at Bell, glad that he'd finally met the person he'd been dreaming about for a long time. He asked Bell for his name, and after Bell told him, he asked if he would grant him a rematch. Bell agreed to his request, and the two began to fight, destroying the things in their path. Meanwhile, Estia and her familia found Gross and the other Xenos and helped them escape, while everyone was focused on the fight. While the fight continued, the Loki familia tried to intervene, but the Freya familia stopped them. Hermes was pissed that his plans had crumbled to dust, but there was nothing he could do anymore. Bell was getting pushed back by Asterius, and his blades were even broken, but seeing how hard he was fighting made those around cheer him on. Suddenly, the sword Otterl had thrown earlier landed behind Asterius, so Bell managed to get behind him and take it. As they fought, Bell decided that if he won, he would become a hero, while Asterius was just happy he got to fight Bell. As the sun rose to its place in the sky, Bell and Asterius stood facing each other, but the fight was far from over. Fueled by his desire to win and become a hero, Bell channeled magic into his sword and prepared to take on Asterius, who threw down his sword. The crazy bull then crouched down, and the next moment, he charged at Bell the same way one of his dumber cousins stuck in a bull ring with a matador would. However, unlike them, he went band for band with Bell, pushing against his magically enhanced sword with his powerful horns. Bell also stood his ground, but at some point, Asterius gained the upper hand and flung him into the air using his horns. When Bell fell back down, Asterius caught him in his hand and charged towards Babel. The members of the Ganesha familia stationed at the entrance immediately jumped out of the way when they saw Asterius. Once he got inside, Asterius turned the place into a fighting ring and forcefully slammed poor Bell into the ground. With the weight he slammed him into the ground, he ought to have broken more than a few bones and damaged some organs. However, Bell only coughed up some blood since his plot armor was stronger than your previous relationship. As he turned over to lie on his side, Asterius walked closer to him. He told Bell that both of them now had a loss and a win in their pockets, and just before he walked away, he promised they would settle their score eventually. The next day, Lyd and the others thanked Fels for using his magic to heal them and apologized for causing him trouble. Fels told them he didn't mind, as he'd been prepared to face anything since he decided to help them. He then asked Lyd where Asterius was, and Lyd informed him that the Minotaur had gone down to the lower levels to resume his training. Meanwhile, in town, the news was that the Loki familia had wiped out the remaining monsters. At the Estia familia house, while they were talking about how glad they were that everything was over, a knock sounded at the door. The chibi shortstop went to open the door only to see that the visitor was Hermes. Seeing his annoying face enraged Estia, so she gave in to her anger and drop-kicked the fool away from the door. Elsewhere, Bell stood at the top of the city walls, staring at the horizon, and he remained like that until Ice found him. After she stood by his side, Belle asked Ice to teach him how to fight again, stating that he needed to become stronger. That's it for today's video. If you love anime recaps like this one, watch this video here. Also, check out our channel to see if your favorite anime has been recapped.